Chapter 137. In the heavy rain, the world seemed to be covered by clouds of fog, and the scenery in the distance could not be seen clearly. In the dark night, the capital city was shrouded in darkness. On the night of the full moon in the Mid-Autumn Festival, His Majesty's beloved prince was assassinated, and His Royal Highness was summoned to the imperial palace overnight. The ministers and aristocratic families who attended the palace banquet were all in a state of panic. One was the legitimate prince with many achievements, and the other was the beloved prince who was favored by the emperor. No matter which one of them had an accident, it would cause chaos in the Sichuan dynasty. This night was destined to not be peaceful. No one could sleep peacefully. No one dared to sing to their heart's content. No one was in the mood to celebrate, because it was possible that the imperial city would be turned upside down overnight. Everyone's gaze turned towards the heavily guarded imperial palace. Everyone's attention was on the tightly shut palace doors. Because they knew that once the palace door was opened, good or bad news would come out, and it would indicate the trend. The matter of the crown prince had been discussed in full swing these 2 days, but it was very likely to be extinguished. This night was destined to be a sleepless night. Xining changed several teacups, but her master clasped her hands on the table, and her eyes were listless. She had no intention to rest or drink tea. Her master had maintained this posture for more than 2 hours. No matter how she persuaded her master, she was unwilling to rest. She could only give up and stand quietly by her master's side, waiting for her master. "The door is not locked, right?" Chu Qingyan suddenly asked. Xining hurriedly replied, "No." Steward Bai obeyed master's order and sent someone to guard the door. If someone calls the door, it will be opened immediately. They won't miss the return of Lord. Chu Qingyan was a little relieved and said, "Remember to keep the ginger soup in the kitchen warm. If His Highness comes back, he can drink it while it's hot. The rain is so heavy, he should be careful not to catch a cold." Xining was a little sad when she heard this, and tears almost fell, but she immediately replied, "Sister Huangyi will take care of it. She said that she will keep the ginger soup warm until Lord comes back." Since she came back, her master had been talking about these things. She was a little distressed for her master. She really hoped that Lord would come back soon, so that her master could stop worrying. Although she knew that once the palace door was locked, it would be difficult to open it again, and although she had asked Turin and Huoling to make preparations, the big ice cube promised her that he would come back, so she would wait for him with the most optimistic heart. She turned to look at the storm that was getting bigger and bigger. The raindrops that were madly hitting the window made pitter-patter sounds. Her heart followed suit. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain, as if someone was stabbing her heart with a needle. She couldn't help but clutch her chest and frown. It seemed that the bad feeling was getting stronger and stronger. "Little princess consort." Huoling's voice suddenly pierced through the rain and entered her ears. Chu Qingyan immediately stood up as her gaze landed on the door. Coincidentally, the fire spirit was rushing in. "Why are you in such a panic?" Huoling, who was always smiling, had an urgent look on his face, making her feel a strong sense of unease. News came from the imperial palace. Master was punished by His Majesty to kneel. Huoling suppressed his anger as he spoke through gritted teeth. "What?" Chu Qingyan couldn't help taking a step back. She looked at Huoling in disbelief. "Is this news accurate?" Huoling nodded with difficulty. "This news came from Chaoyang Palace. There is no mistake." "Where did he kneel?" Her voice was very low. "Mingchen Hall, in front of the palace where the fourth prince lives." Huoling clenched his fist as he angrily said. Chu Qingyan heard this and turned to look at the crazy rain outside. Her eyes became hot. Such a big rain and such a cold wind, she did not know if the big ice cube could handle it. But her voice trembled a little. Huoling said through gritted teeth, "The fourth prince was attacked by an assassin and His Majesty took his anger out on Master. He punished him to kneel without any explanation. Moreover, this is not the first time." "It's not the first time?" Her voice was filled with shock. "That's right. Many years ago, when the fourth prince was just born, Master was also very young and accidentally made the fourth prince cry. His Majesty made him kneel as punishment. This time, it was the first time Master wore a mask. The fourth prince came to the palace for a visit. When he saw the mask on Master's face, he cried in fright. His Majesty was furious and also made Master kneel as punishment. Also, speaking to there, Hualing couldn't continue. He only let out a cold sigh. He did not want to tell the little princess, but thinking about it, since Master cared about her so much, she should understand Master more and care more about Master because Master had been alone for too long. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips as anger filled her eyes. Her heart was filled with pain. When the fourth prince was just born, the big ice cube was still a child. When he put on the mask, the big ice cube had just escaped from a sea of fire. His body and mind were both damaged, yet the Sichuan emperor really could do it. The Sichuan emperor really went too far. He was not worthy of being a father. These things were clearly not intentional, but in his eyes, the fourth prince was his treasure. No matter who it was that touched him, he would not forgive them. Actually, the Sichuan emperor's heart was crooked. The big ice cube had not been this cold since he was young. It should have been because he was hurt again and again when he was young that the cold accumulated and turned into this cold person. The so-called 3 feet of ice was not formed in a single day. This should be it. But she did not want to think that much. She just wanted the big ice cube to come back soon. On such a cold night, with such cold rain, with him kneeling in the palace without any human feelings, her heart ached when she thought of that scene. That tall god of war who seemed like nothing could defeat him. His Royal Highness who was always cold, but had a softer heart than others. That big ice cube who was always fierce to her, but would always soften his tone when she acted coquettishly. She could not bear to leave him alone in such a cold world. She regretted it. If she had insisted on going with him at that time, he would not have to face the loneliness of the reunion night alone. If she had insisted a little more and acted coquettishly, perhaps his heart would have softened. But the heavens did not let people regret, and there were no ifs. The night slowly passed. The rain slowly became lighter. The sky slowly brightened. Chu Qingyan, who was sitting on the bed, looked up at the dispersing dark clouds. The morning sun slowly shone through the haze. The day had begun again. Usually, she welcomed the beginning of a new day with a good mood. But at this moment, she hoped that the sky would brighten a little later and that the new day would come later. When the sky was just turning white, Turin walked in with a serious expression. Just now, news came from the palace. Master has been locked up in the prison. The cup in his hand slipped and fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Chu Qingyan looked at the wet ground, the scattered tea leaves, and the broken pieces that Xining had rushed over to clean up. She was stunned. Chapter 138. Seeing the dazed little princess, Hualing and Xining looked at her with worry. Chu Qingyan was stunned for a moment before she forced herself to pull herself together. She looked at Hualing, her eyes glistening with tears. Last night, I knelt in the palace for an entire night. This morning, I was locked up in the prison. I don't know if His Highness' body can take it. Can you think of a way to find out news about His Highness? Water Spirit is already thinking of a way to send a message to Master. Little princess, don't worry. Hualing immediately replied. Actually, no one was relieved. Everyone knew that everything had happened too suddenly and it was too dangerous. How are fourth prince's injuries? Chu Qingyan thought of Xiao Ran and couldn't help asking. Fourth prince's injuries are serious. It said that he was stabbed in the chest by a sword, but fortunately his vitals weren't hit. He was only out of danger this morning, but he is still unconscious. Hualing reported the latest news. Chu Qingyan nodded. It was good that Xiao Ran was fine. Otherwise, the big ice cube wouldn't have just been imprisoned. With how much Dong Lin Emperor doted on Xiao Ran, the big ice cube's life would have been in danger. She felt a bit sorry for Xiao Ran. He treated her as a friend, but she was worried about the big ice cube's safety. Forget it, when the big ice cube was fine, she would make it up to him. The most important thing now was to save the big ice cube. How is this kind of case usually handled? She was directly imprisoned by the emperor. She was worried that if she was convicted, there wouldn't be any room to turn things around. The Supreme Court will investigate the case and then choose a day for the trial. With master status, it should be a joint trial. His Majesty might be there personally. Hualing grabbed the chair with one hand and the anger in his heart was hard to dispel. Chu Qingyan nodded. Then how many days do we have to investigate the case? Hualing shook his head with a bitter smile. Those ministers have always steered according to the wind. Now that His Majesty is furious, it is clear that he has determined that Master is the mastermind behind this. How could those ministers still bother to investigate this case? Chu Qingyan was startled. Once you're proud, you'll be praised by tens of thousands. Once you're down, you'll be trampled on by tens of thousands. No, we can't just sit here and wait for death. Turin, gather all of you and see if there's any way to save His Highness. Also, doesn't His Highness have some hangers-on under him? See if you can brainstorm. Chu Qingyan's tone was a little anxious. When Hualing heard this, he felt that this was the most feasible method. He agreed and turned to leave, but then he stopped and looked up at the young Wang Fei. Turin is doing his best to find the real culprit behind the scenes, and Water Spirit is also trying to find news about Master, so please don't worry. You must take care of your body. Chu Qingyan smiled at him, indicating that she understood. However, knowing was one thing, doing it was another. Xining looked at her master's lifeless eyes and her heart was filled with pity. The fire spirit met Turin and Ethereal after leaving the door. How is the investigation of the real culprit behind the scenes? Hualing immediately asked. Turin shook his head. This assassin is very cunning. After he was discovered when he tried to assassinate the fourth prince, he was chased by the Imperial Guards. He was very familiar with the layout of the Imperial Palace, so the Imperial Guards lost him. His current whereabouts are unknown, but one thing is certain, this person is still in the capital. After the incident, the 4 gates of the capital were sealed. Anyone who entered or left had to go through strict checks, so that assassin should be hiding somewhere in the capital right now. Ethereal, who had been silent on the side, spoke up. I secretly asked a few Imperial physicians that I'm close with. They said that the fourth prince's wounds were neat and clean. It's clear that the assassin is not a normal assassin, but someone who has undergone strict training. He might even be a hidden guard. Hualing forcefully hit the wall beside him when he heard this, but it was hard for him to vent the anger in his heart. This really was a carefully planned trap. They used Master's name to lure out the fourth prince, and Master just happened to not be here at the time. It really makes people unable to explain themselves. Turin shook his head in ridicule. You're wrong. There is evidence that Master was not present, but His Majesty does not believe it. Moreover, there is no need for him to do something like an assassination himself. Moreover, it is currently an eventful period for the Crown Prince. His Majesty is certain that Master is unwilling to take the risk to get rid of his opponent, so when the time comes, no matter how much evidence there is, His Majesty will not believe it. But we can't just watch as Master is wronged and can't do anything. Hualing hated himself for being incompetent. Ethereal had the same self-blame on his face. When we first returned to the capital, we all thought that we wouldn't stay in the capital for too long, so when Lord didn't deploy his spies, I didn't remind him. Looking at it now, I should have advised Master to leave a way out for himself. If our people had infiltrated everywhere, we wouldn't be as helpless as we are now. Turin patted his shoulder. You can't be blamed for all of this. Who would have guessed that His Majesty would take away all of Master's military power? At this point, Turin suddenly raised his head and looked at the young Wang Fei standing in front of the windowsill. His eyes were so deep that no light could be seen. Young Wang Fei, this is the current situation. If you are afraid, this subordinate can send you away. Turin's tone was calm and somewhat cold. What do you mean? When Turin and Ethereal appeared in front of her windowsill, she faintly felt that they were talking to her. Nothing, but Master once said that if something happens to him, if you want to leave, this subordinate can protect you until you leave. Turin looked at her and said word by word, as if he wanted to see something from her face. When did he say that? Chu Qingyan put her hands on the windowsill and suppressed her emotions. When the young Wang Fei was poisoned. This time, if His Majesty insisted that it was Master's doing, then the young Wang Fei couldn't escape being implicated. Everyone's eyes fell on Chu Qingyan. Her lowered eyelids faintly trembled, but she suddenly calmed down. It's not the last moment yet. Why are you saying such discouraging words? She slowly raised her head. Her eyes were filled with a determined light that people didn't dare to look directly at. If His Highness knows that you are panicking, he won't forgive you when he comes out. Cheer up and get to work. Chu Qingyan said coldly. This was the first time she spoke so harshly to Turin and the others. She seemed to have returned to her university days. The stage was still being built when it suddenly started to rain. Everyone told her to cancel it, but the invitations from all the universities had been sent out. The leaders of the universities would arrive in an hour. The rain blurred her eyes, but she stood on the stage and didn't admit defeat. She shouted to the workers below, "It's not the last moment yet. Don't give up. Set up the canopy. Hurry. Get the poles ready. Get to work." She couldn't give up. That was everyone's hard work for a year. She couldn't give up because it wasn't a joint performance. It was a living person that she liked. Turin, Fire Spirit, and Ethereal looked at the tightly shut window. They suddenly felt that they didn't know her anymore. The confident, wise, and bold woman seemed to have transformed overnight. Turin, I suddenly feel that maybe I know why she can win Lord's heart, Ethereal said lightly. No, in fact, none of us understood it. The first person to understand it was His Highness. The Earth Spirit patted their shoulders. Then they left together. The little princess was right. They couldn't give up so easily. Their master was still waiting for them to rescue him. Hearing their footsteps leave, Chu Qingyan leaned against the window and slowly slid down. In the end, she sat on the ground and hugged her knees, crying helplessly. Big Ice Cube, you knew this day would come, didn't you? So you prepared a backup plan for me in advance, right? How can you make my heart ache so much? How can I save you? Big Ice Cube. Chapter 139. The fourth prince was assassinated and the eldest prince was imprisoned. Overnight, the people of the imperial court were in a state of panic. In the morning court, the fourth prince's faction, led by the right Prime Minister Fu Jianrong, was devastated. They scolded the King of England for being cruel and inhumane. He even killed his own brother. The ministers who stood on the King of England's side retorted that this was a blatant framing. They could not accuse him without evidence. When a war of words was about to break out, the Sichuan Emperor ordered the Supreme Court Chancellor to thoroughly investigate the matter. The left Prime Minister Liang Qingyu, Empress Liang's father and Xiao Su's grandfather, pleaded on behalf of Xiao Su. The Sichuan Emperor was furious and rejected his pleas. The ministers who supported Xiao Su all kept their mouths shut and did not dare to say a word. After the morning court, the fourth prince's faction snorted at the King of England's faction and then left. Prime Minister Liang's face was full of anger. A minister beside him asked in a low voice, "Left Prime Minister, what should we do now?" Prime Minister Liang said with a sullen face, "His Majesty has been looking for an opportunity to suppress His Royal Highness, but he could not find an opportunity. This time, His Highness wanted to return to the border, but His Majesty did not want to let the tiger return to the mountain and cause trouble in the future, so he insisted on keeping His Highness here. Now that this has happened, even if His Majesty knows that he is not the mastermind behind this, he will still turn a blind eye to it." His Highness, the minister did not say anything clearly. That minister had not been in the bureaucracy for a day or two, so he nodded in shock. Looking at His Majesty's attitude, His Royal Highness would not be able to escape censure. "But we can't let His Royal Highness take the blame for this," the minister whispered. Prime Minister Liang nodded. "I will go find the Empress and see what she has to say." Left Prime Minister, please go. I will wait for your news. No matter what happens, I will advance and retreat with your Highness, the minister said solemnly. Liang Xiang took a deep look at him. This was the deputy general who had followed him for decades. He had been a small soldier back then, but he had overcome all obstacles and killed 6 generals all the way to the brave general he was now. Now, he was already over 50 years old. His hair was white and his body was straight, but it was hard to hide his heroic appearance. Liang Xiang patted his shoulder and said, "Okay." There was no need for words to be said. The agreement between gentlemen had already been fulfilled. In Chaoyang Palace, Empress Liang was leaning against the couch, looking exhausted. When she heard that her father wanted to see her, She immediately ordered someone to bring him in. This old subject greets the Empress. Prime Minister Liang bowed. Empress Liang hurriedly ordered someone to help him up. Her father was about to enter the threshold of 60 years old. Although his body was strong, it was difficult to hide the fact that he was aging day by day. Her son was imprisoned in the prison and she felt very uncomfortable. Seeing her father in front of her, she couldn't help but feel wronged. "Father," after Empress Liang called out, she was a little choked with emotions. Prime Minister Liang sighed. Father came to the palace this time because of Su. When Empress Liang heard this, she waved her attendants away. There were only 2 people in the large hall. "Father, do you have a way to save Su?" Empress Liang's eyes were filled with hope. Prime Minister Liang looked at his daughter in front of him. Since she was young, this daughter had not grown up in front of him. She had stayed in the boudoir and had seen many open and covert struggles in the inner court. She had learned a lot, but she had always lacked the ability to see the big picture. Moreover, she was not broad-minded enough. That was why she had been suppressed by Consort Yu these past few years. Even His Majesty was unwilling to approach her Chaoyang palace. However, now was not the time to think about these things. Su was the most important thing. After the 4th prince was attacked by an assassin, did you visit him? Did you comfort Consort Yu? Prime Minister Liang asked. Empress Liang's eyes immediately widened. That slut's child was injured. Why should this consort visit him? This consort couldn't even be happier, let alone comfort that slut. When Prime Minister Liang heard this, he shook his head. No one knew his daughter better than her father. He had already expected this, so he raised his hand to stop her from throwing a tantrum. Nonsense. Do you still think that you're the legitimate daughter of the Fu family who can do as she pleases? You must recognize your current status. You are the empress of a country. Your speech and actions must have the demeanor of an empress. Don't blame His Majesty for favoring Imperial Concubine Yu. Look at Imperial Concubine Yu's appearance, then look at yourself. Empress Liang refused to accept being scolded. Consort Yu's methods are vicious and vicious. Father, how can you praise her and belittle your own daughter? Prime Minister Liang rubbed his forehead. But she knows when to be soft and when to be ruthless. That's why in His Majesty's eyes, she's gentle and pleasant, while you're selfish and narrow-minded. This is the difference. You've lived in this cannibalistic palace for 20 years. How can you still be like a child? Don't blame His Majesty for not liking Su. In fact, most of the reason is because of you. Empress Liang wanted to refute, but she couldn't say anything. Prime Minister Liang continued, when the incident happened last night, you should have immediately sent imperial physicians to treat the 4th prince. Comforting Consort Yu is the same as comforting the harem. You shouldn't have been so stingy as to send precious medicinal ingredients to Mingchen Hall. Only this could show your magnanimity and steadiness as the head of the harem. But look at what you've done. If someone were to make a fuss about this, they would think that you were too guilty to show up because your son did something wrong. If you had taken care of everything, His Majesty wouldn't have disrespected you as the head of the harem and mercilessly punished you. If you don't quickly wake up, I'm afraid that our Liang family will decline, or die without a burial place. Empress Liang was so scared that she trembled. She immediately grabbed her father's hand and asked in panic, "Then what should daughter do now?" "Do as father said just now. Reward and comfort. Don't miss a single glance." Okay, what else? Empress Liang finally understood the seriousness of the matter. If it weren't for her father's advice, Su would have been ruined by her. Also, Prime Minister Liang sighed softly, go and beg His Majesty. For the sake of our many years of relationship as husband and wife, let Su off the hook. At the very least, there should be a fair investigation process. Empress Liang nodded. This was the only thing she could do. When Prime Minister Liang was about to leave, Empress Liang suddenly called out to him. Father, if His Majesty isn't willing to let go of this opportunity to suppress Su, then her tone was somewhat gloomy. Then, Prime Minister Liang didn't turn back, we'll prepare for the worst. There's no turning back. Empress Liang's eyes darkened even more. Okay. If that was the case, then they could only cut off all means of retreat. On the 9th floor of the celestial prison, Xiao Su sat on the floor in plain clothes. His expression was cold and cheerless, and he didn't become impatient because he was locked up in the celestial prison. He raised his head to look at the moon outside the window and remembered what the little fellow had said to him before. The moon on the 15th was full on the 16th. He had never paid attention to the full moon before. He only noticed it because of the little fellow. Tonight's moon was indeed very round. He remembered that he had promised her that he would accompany her to admire the moon tonight. Unfortunately, he could only go back on his word. He didn't know if the little fellow was frightened by his matter. Xiao Su's gaze became as cold and cheerless as the moonlight. The taste of longing, like the cool breeze and the bright moon, was indescribable. Chapter 140. Another day passed by. After hearing about the Sichuan Emperor's decree from Hualing and the others, Chu Qingyan began to miss Xiao Su even more. She was locked up for no reason and had to wait for trial. How long would it take for her to see the big ice cube? In the study, Hualing, Turin, and the others had already gathered all the retainers and were discussing a solution. Suddenly, she stood up. Everyone looked at her and Hualing asked, "Little princess consort, what are you doing?" Chu Qingyan looked at them. "I want to go to the prison to see His Highness." Turin frowned. "But if you go to see His Highness now, the guards probably won't let you in." Hualing nodded in agreement. Actually, everyone was worried. Her status was low, so the people in the prison might not think highly of her and let her in. Chu Qingyan saw through their thoughts and smiled slyly. "But don't forget, my status is the King of England's consort personally bestowed by His Majesty. This is an undeniable fact. We haven't come up with a solution after discussing it for a day. Why don't we go and listen to His Highness' idea? Maybe he has a way to save himself. Don't just stand there. Do you have any of our own people in the prison? Let's contact them so that it'll be easier to do things later." She was the princess consort of the royal family. Even if someone wanted to stop her, they had to consider their own status. Turin, Ethereal, and the others felt that this might work and nodded in agreement. Turin thought carefully and replied, "The guards in the prison are from the Fu family. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to get in. But the prison guard in charge of the prison has received master's favor before. Let's see if he can help." Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows. "Okay, I'll ask Cheng Yi and Huang Yi to prepare clothes and food." Cheng Yi and Huang immediately went to prepare when they heard that they were going to visit Lord in prison. An hour later, Chu Qingyan, Xining, and the others had boarded the carriage and were escorted by Hualing and the others to the prison. In the King of England's residence, Cheng Yi handed a slip of paper to a servant and said softly, "Chu Qingyan is going to the prison to visit Lord. Pass this news to consort you." Cheng Yi watched as the young servant disappeared through the back door and viciously smiled. She was someone that imperial concubine Moon had placed at the prince's side since he was a child. She had always been there to pass on news from the prince's palace and help imperial concubine Moon complete some matters. But as Lord gradually shone with his manly charm, she became infatuated with Lord. She hoped that one day she could sit in the position of the head of the harem. But in the past few years, Lord turned a blind eye to her various hints. She knew that Lord didn't care about these romantic feelings, so she planned to take it slow. But who knew that Chu Qingyan would suddenly appear? She originally wanted to see Chu Qingyan make a fool of herself, but she didn't expect that Chu Qingyan would become Lord's reverse scale. No one could touch her. In the past, she had hoped that Lord would treat her differently, but now she didn't have the chance. Then don't blame her for being ruthless. Thinking of this, Cheng Yi flicked her sleeves and left. Chu Qingyan, who was driving on the road, didn't know that their hearts had been exposed. They arrived at the prison. Chu Qingyan alighted from the carriage and saw the prison made of green stone bricks. It gave off a sinister and cold feeling. The heavenly prison basically locked up people who were extremely vicious or had committed heinous crimes. So, the prison was more strict than other places. In front of the iron gate, there were more than 10 elite guards. When they saw Chu Qingyan and the others, they immediately shouted coldly, "Who are you? Report your name. This is my family's King of England's consort. She wants to enter the prison to visit my family's lord. Sir, please make things convenient. Hualing approached and secretly stuffed the banknotes in his hand into the officer's hand. He said in a low voice, "This small token is not enough to show my respect. Sir, please drink some wine. The prison is an important place. How can you casually approach it?" A cold voice sounded. At this time, the iron gate opened in response. The officer immediately pushed Hualing's hand away and bowed to the person behind the iron gate. "Greetings to sir." Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes at the man with a protruding belly and an oily face in front of her. The Fu family's disciple, the current prison guard, Lu Chu. According to Hualing's information, Lu Chu was not present today. Why did he suddenly appear? So it's Sir Lu. This princess consort wants to visit my family's lord. Sir, please make an exception. Chu Qingyan said with a smile. She did not want to hit a smiling person. Lu Chu had just received Consort Yu's secret letter and immediately rushed over. He was still a bit out of breath. When he looked at the young girl in front of him, he became impatient. Now that the King of England is an important suspect, no one is allowed to visit him. Consort King of England, please go back. Lu Chu waved his hand and was about to order someone to close the iron gate when he was stopped by someone. Sir Lu, although my family's lord is a suspect, who said that no one is allowed to visit him? His Majesty did not issue a decree, right? Moreover, Chu Qingyan looked at him deeply, my family's lord has not been convicted. He still has the right to be visited in prison. Lu Chu was speechless. Indeed, the King of England was only detained. There was no explicit decree that prohibited him from contacting the outside world. But Imperial concubine Moon had said that since the fourth prince had been attacked by an assassin, no one was allowed to see him, regardless of whether or not it was related to Prince Ying. Perhaps this was a great opportunity to overthrow Prince Ying. As Lu Chu thought of the benefits that Imperial concubine Moon had promised him, he immediately straightened his back and shook his belly as he spoke with a righteous tone. Please forgive this official for not being able to agree to your request. Chu Qingyan coldly laughed. Lu Chu, there was a path to heaven but you refused to take it. There was no door to hell but you chose to throw yourself into it. Chu Qingyan slowly walked towards Lu Chu with a somewhat creepy smile on her face. When Lu Chu saw her sinister smile, his heart suddenly trembled. Stop. The imperial prison is an important place. No one is allowed to approach. Official Lu, can we talk in private? Chu Qingyan had a good temper as she stopped. This official has nothing to say to you. Lu Chu raised his chin and said. Chu Qingyan held her head and seemed to have a headache as she said, so it's like this. Then what happened on the 6th day of the 5th month? What about the 7th day of the 6th month, the 19th day of the 6th month, and the 23rd day of the 7th month? I don't know if everyone here is curious about the story of stealing the sky and swapping the sun? Curious. Little Wang Fei, don't leave people hanging. Tell us. Hua Ling and the others understood and cooperated with her. Then before Chu Qingyan could finish, someone interrupted her. Wait. When Chu Qingyan said the first date, his forehead was already covered in sweat. He had comforted himself that perhaps she was just making things up. However, the more he listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. If he allowed her to continue, the consequences would be unimaginable. Does official Lu have something to say? Chu Qingyan pretended to be surprised as she looked at him. This official remembers now. His Royal Highness does have the right to visit. Please come in. Lu Chu wiped his sweat. Official Lu is truly understanding. This princess is very grateful. Chu Qingyan said with a smile. Then what about the things you just said? Lu Chu asked in a roundabout manner. In those days, the most vicious people were killed. This princess was happy for the citizens. Chu Qingyan said in an innocent voice. The King of England's consort is right, you're right. Lu Chu wiped his sweat again. Chu Qingyan gave a cold laugh in her heart. How could she not be prepared for anything? She had already had Hua Ling investigate Lu Chu's background and had firmly grasped his weakness. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Chapter 141. Every human being had a weakness. And Lu Chu had a fatal weakness, which was that he was greedy and lecherous. Watching over prisoners was a lucrative job, so he often took advantage of his position to accept bribes. If that was all, Chu Qingyan would have a hard time dealing with him. But this man was so greedy that a few prisoners on death row had bought their lives with 10,000 taels of silver. On the day of the execution, Lu Chu had secretly replaced the prisoner. After all, most of the time, the head of the prisoner had to be covered during the execution, so no one knew if the person being beheaded was the real person. Furthermore, no one had expected that Lu Chu would dare to deceive his superiors and his subordinates, deceive everyone, and secretly carry out his dirty tricks. So when Chu Qingyan found out about this, she felt that God was on her side. So what if Lu Chu was a member of the Fu family? She had something on him, so he would not dare to make things difficult for her. So Chu Qingyan led her men to the prison cell, but they were stopped halfway. Chu Qingyan looked at Lu Chu with a smile. "What is the meaning of this, Lord Lu?" "According to the rules of the prison, you can only bring one person with you," Lord Lu explained while wiping his sweat. He did not know why, but when he saw the little princess smiling at him, he felt goosebumps all over his body. Chu Qingyan nodded. "The rules cannot be broken. I understand." So she turned around and looked at the people she had brought with her. Without hesitation, she tapped on Ethereal. Ethereal was a doctor, so he would be useful to her. If something happened to Big Ice Cube in the rain, he would be able to take a look at him. So the two of them slowly walked into the depths of the prison cell, led by the officers. After Chu Qingyan and the others disappeared into the light, Lu Chu clenched his fists and spat. He had caught eagles for many years, but he did not expect that one day he would be pecked in the eye by an eagle, and such a young one at that. The secret he had kept for so many years had been discovered. He was flustered and angry, but there was nothing he could do. He did not know how to explain it to Consort Yu. Consort Yu had promised him a prosperous future, but the King of England's consort had his lifeline in her hands. Between money and life, of course his life was more important. The people waiting at the stairs bowed deeply to Chu Qingyan. "Prison head Zhang, thank you for your trouble." This was the person Turin and the others had mentioned. He was the one who had received the Big Ice Cube's favor. "Consort King of England is too polite. Please come this way." Prison head Zhang bowed and led the way. Chu Qingyan nodded and walked forward with Ethereal. The 9th floor of the heavenly prison didn't go up one floor at a time. Instead, it went down one floor at a time. It has no light, it is darkness. The further down they went, the quieter it became. Other than the sound of footsteps echoing in this enclosed space, there was only the sound of water dripping. This prison was eerie, terrifying, and cold. Chu Qingyan tightly grasped the handkerchief. Looking at this dark and eerie place, her heart inexplicably tightened. Is this where the Big Ice Cube is? It was hard to imagine. It was said that the most terrifying places in the world were none other than these three: the casino, the backyard, and the prison cell. Ethereal saw her slightly changed expression and couldn't help but say, "Actually, this place is nothing. This one and the Lord have been at the border for so many years. The battlefield is the real cruel place. The Lord has suffered so much. This is nothing to him." She knew that Ethereal was comforting her, but when she heard his explanation, her heart felt even more uncomfortable. She could only reply casually, until prison head Zhang said, "We're here." Only then did she raise her head abruptly. At the end of the corridor was a solitary cell. Cold and dark iron pillars blocked the way. Inside that cell was the person she had been thinking about day and night. A black figure sat on the ground, looking up at the wall. His posture was casual, as if he wasn't in a dark prison cell, but sitting in a pavilion, lazily resting. Chu Qingyan quietly looked at him, thousands of thoughts surging in her heart. "Big Ice Cube, you're actually not strong at all. Look, you're wearing such thin clothes, your figure looks very thin. Big Ice Cube, you're actually not living well at all. Your father is biased and heartless, your mother is strict and indifferent. You've never enjoyed any love since you were young. Big Ice Cube, you're actually not cold-blooded and cruel at all. You're the loneliest person I've ever met who never showed it on his face. As if sensing someone's gaze, Xiao Su slowly turned his head. When he met that pair of eyes flickering with pitiful tears, his heart suddenly trembled. Those sorrowful eyes didn't carry pity, but pity. This was the first time, other than Imperial Grandfather and Master, he saw someone look at him like that. You're here, Qingyan. This was the first time he spoke since he entered the prison. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Although the mask covered his face, that moment of youth made her absent-minded. It was like he had crossed something and arrived in front of her. When she came back to her senses, she had already charged into the prison cell and fiercely hugged him. She wanted to burst into tears and ask him why he didn't go back home. She wanted to forcefully hit him, punishing him for making her worried and afraid these past few days. But she couldn't. She couldn't cry right now and couldn't blame the big ice cube because the big ice cube would feel worse than her. She didn't want to force this feeling on the big ice cube because he was already tired enough. Xiao Su tightened his arms and pulled the person in his embrace into his embrace. These past few days, his heart had been too cold and he somewhat missed her warmth. He thought that she would cry her eyes out, but it was a pity that when she left his embrace, he saw her angry expression. Big Ice Cube, you really are too stupid. If you let me go into the palace with you, you wouldn't be here alone right now. At least you still have me. Xiao Su was a bit surprised before he revealed a smile. He rubbed her head and raised his brows as he said with a smile, in the Sichuan country's prison, men and women are separated. This king doesn't want to hear your ghostly wails in the middle of the night. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes at him. Then she took the food box from Ethereal's hands and opened it. She took out the dishes one by one and placed them on the table. Then she handed him a clean pair of chopsticks and a spoon. Although you're in a single room with a bed and a table, the conditions aren't bad, but the food won't be as good as the palace's. Hurry up and eat. Otherwise, it'll be a waste of the good intentions I brought. Xiao Su saw her urging expression and his heart was slightly moved. This was a special time. For her to be able to enter the prison, it must have taken a lot of effort. Xiao Su did not refuse and took the chopsticks. Although he had just eaten lunch, he didn't want to refuse her good intentions. Ethereal looked at the two who were getting along so well and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. How did the young princess consort who looked like she was about to cry become a spoiled and unruly young girl in the blink of an eye? While he was lost in thought, the young princess consort called out to him, Ethereal, after His Highness finishes eating, help him take a look and see if he's caught a cold. While Ethereal was taking his pulse, Xiao Su asked, Is everything all right in the palace? Chu Qingyan nodded vigorously, I'm here, don't worry. Even if it wasn't good, it must be good right now. She didn't want the Big Ice Cube to worry about the palace at this time. Big Ice Cube, do you have any thoughts about this matter? Chapter 142. After Chu Qingyan asked this, she looked at him nervously, afraid that he would say no. Xiao Su lowered his brows and muttered to himself for a moment. The first is to find the mastermind, the second is for fourth imperial brother to wake up and testify for this king. She had thought about the 2 points that Big Ice Cube said before. Water Spirit and Hualing had never stopped looking for that assassin, but it was a pity that the person who set this trap was too cunning and they couldn't find any clues at all. Xiao Ran's palace was currently being protected by layers of imperial guards and was completely surrounded. They only knew that he was out of danger, but they couldn't find any news about him right now. And more importantly, they didn't know if Xiao Ran could wake up before his trial. These two methods were probably very difficult to accomplish. Ethereal took back his hand and said to the two, There is nothing wrong with Lord's body. Chu Qingyan finally relaxed. Xiao Su pulled down his sleeve. He knew his own body best and he only accepted the pulse to reassure her. Are there any other methods? She continued to ask. For the current situation, there are only these 2 methods. Xiao Su's voice was indifferent, as if he wasn't talking about his own matters and he wasn't worried at all. Chu Qingyan suddenly felt incomparably sad. She reached out to grab his sleeve and said, But Big Ice Cube, I don't want you to be wronged. I don't want you to take the blame. I don't want you to be blamed. I don't want anything to happen to you. Xiao Su's heart seemed to be blown by a gentle breeze. It was a bit warm and soothed the coldness from the past few days. He leaned against the iron bars and calmly looked at the person in front of him. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Even if I'm convicted, nothing will happen. At most, his power would be taken away. At most, he would lose the right to compete for the position of crown prince. At most, he would be chased out of the capital. At most, that would be it. He had already made preparations and was waiting for this day to come. He just didn't think that it would come so quickly, that his imperial father would be so impatient, and that an accident would happen in his life. He lowered his head and looked at the girl who was worried about him. He thought, if Mao Zedong hadn't saved him, if he hadn't heard her love for her parents under the window of the Chu Manor, if he hadn't approached her with a pure and warm smile, then would his life not have this accident? He wouldn't be distracted and want to protect her. He wouldn't punish his subordinates for not protecting her well, and he wouldn't feel pity for her because he saw her suffer in training. But if it weren't for this accident, he wouldn't have any worries in his heart. There would be no one who could cure him of his loneliness. This was the first time he had someone he wanted to protect. Chu Qingyan did not know why Big Ice Cube would say that, but Kong Ling, who was standing at the side, understood the hidden meaning behind the prince's words. He couldn't help but turn his back and look up at the top of the prison, trying hard to suppress the emotions in his heart. He knew that Lord would be summoned back to the capital this year, and he had expected it. Otherwise, Lord wouldn't have arranged everything when he left the border. And when he returned to the capital, his trusted subordinates wouldn't only bring them. It turned out that Lord had already seen through it. He clenched his fists, and his heart burned with anger. He really felt that his Lord wasn't worth it. Big Ice Cube, don't worry, I will definitely think of a way to save you. If it doesn't work in the end, I will break the prison with Turin and the others. Chu Qingyan raised her fist and said firmly. Hearing this, Xiao Su smiled and shook his head. He was amused by the little girl's plan. Seeing this, Chu Qingyan immediately looked at him with dissatisfaction. I'm serious, we have to plan for every situation, okay? And her expression suddenly changed into yearning, roaming the world from now on, watching the rosy clouds side by side, riding a horse to share the prosperity of the world. This kind of feeling is really good, just like when Kong and Yongqi rescued Little Swallow and Ziwei from the celestial prison. Treading thousands of waters and traveling to the ends of the world, this kind of feeling is also very good. Suddenly, her head was pressed down, and her thoughts were interrupted. Chu Qingyan rubbed her head and looked at the ice cube who was withdrawing his hand. She couldn't help but resist. Big Ice Cube, can you not spoil the fun like this? What I said is all true. Xiao Su shook his head. That's not wandering the world, but being chased to the ends of the world. Chu Qingyan was silent when she heard this. It was indeed possible. Xiao Su's gaze fell on her, and his eyes became deep. If things get out of hand, let Huoling and the others arrange for you to leave. You were originally a chess piece that Imperial Father placed by my side to weaken my power. Once the game is set, you have no use. Imperial Father will not make things difficult for you. But when he said this, the little fellow's expression changed. Big Ice Cube, don't always think of a way out for others but always put yourself in a hopeless situation, okay? I will arrange my own path, I don't need you to interfere. I hate you. Chu Qingyan stood up, her face full of anger. She flung her sleeves and left. Ethereal looked at her lord, and then looked at the young princess consort who was quickly leaving. She didn't know what to say. If it comes to a point where there is no other choice, send her away and ensure her safety, Xiao Su said indifferently. His gaze was on the ground, and he didn't look in the direction she left. Lord, Ethereal wanted to speak, but was stopped by Lord's cold gaze. Do as Ben Wang says, Xiao Su said firmly. Yes. Ethereal gritted her teeth and then turned to leave. Chu Qingyan, who ran out of the prison, actually regretted it. She shouldn't have lost her temper at the Big Ice Cube. This was a precious opportunity to meet him, but she actually ruined it. She stomped her feet and was angry at herself. But who told the Big Ice Cube to say so many infuriating words? Consort King of England. Lu Chu hadn't left yet and was waiting at the door. Chu Qingyan collected her emotions and looked at Ethereal, who had followed her before walking towards him. Lord Lu, my lord is in prison. I hope that you can help me look after him. For example, the quilt and the hot tea. I won't go into the details. Lu Chu, who had been caught red-handed, was angry but didn't dare to say anything. He could only nod and bow in agreement. As for those things, as long as you treat my lord well and don't let him be wronged, this princess promises to keep it a secret. But, Chu Qingyan leaned close to his ear and snorted, you know the consequences. After Chu Qingyan left, Lu Chu wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and subconsciously shook his body. He could not tell that this little princess consort was quite cunning. But he could not do as she said. What a trap. After getting on the carriage, Hualing, who was acting as the driver, asked, Little princess consort, are we preparing to return to the Fu? No, I want to enter the palace, she said in a low voice. Although Hualing was a bit surprised, he still turned the carriage around and headed towards the imperial palace. Chu Qingyan had just left when a person appeared in front of Xiao Su's cell. Xiao Su turned and saw the person, but he didn't look surprised at all. Chapter 143. Xiao Su was not at all surprised to see this person in the celestial prison. It was his grandfather. He was a brave and fearless elder who had entered and exited the borders 3 times with the Sichuan emperor and recovered the territory that had been invaded 100 years ago. He had once again expanded the territory of the Sichuan kingdom. He was also the current left prime minister of the Sichuan kingdom. Liang Qingyu. Grandfather, how have you been these past few days? Xiao Su stood up and calmly saluted him. Liang Qingyu saw that although he was in the celestial prison, he still had an indifferent attitude and saluted him with some relief. He had been in the military all his life and had a strong personality. He could not tolerate people who cried endlessly and had no opinions of their own. Fortunately, his grandson was not like his mother, who was short-sighted and unwilling to be outdone. But sometimes he didn't like his grandson's personality. He looked sharp, but in reality he was the one who was most unwilling to fight and scheme against others. But his wisdom, his courage, and insight were things that others didn't have. Su, you have suffered. Liang Qingyu sighed softly. Grandfather, don't say that. It's quite good here. It's quiet and no one disturbs me. This is not considered crying. Xiao Su calmly replied. He really did not feel that there was any suffering here. No matter how difficult it was, he had already lived through it. Everything else was nothing to him. Liang Qingyu sighed again. The prince who should have been favored by the heavens, the legitimate son of the first heir, and the prince who should have enjoyed the admiration of tens of thousands of people, was now wronged and imprisoned in the celestial prison. Even his appearance had been burned beyond recognition in the fire 10 years ago. In his eyes, this child was plagued with misfortune. He used to be so cute and intelligent, but now he was so cold and distant. No one could see what he was thinking with those ink-black eyes. A few years ago, the emperor had sent him out to the borders to gain experience. In reality, it was to give the 4th prince time to grow and help the 4th prince consolidate his position. Su-er knew all this, but he quietly left. He also managed the borders in an orderly manner and repelled countless invasions from neighboring countries. Unfortunately, no matter how much he did, the emperor did not take it seriously. If he could not find a solution to this matter, then he would not be able to turn the situation around. The Liang family's position was tied to his. If something happened to him, not only Empress Liang, but even the Liang family would be in danger. For the Liang family, he would not allow this to happen. Regarding this matter, grandfather has already sent people to talk to the Supreme Court officials in charge of handling the case. Your mother will also plead with your father. Liang Xiang wanted to pat him on the shoulder, but when he raised his hand halfway, he remembered that he didn't like human contact, so he awkwardly withdrew his hand. I've troubled Grandpa. Xiao Su looked at his aged grandfather. Although his body was still strong, there were gray strands of hair at his temples. Xiao Su sighed. Time waited for no man. He had grown up, but his grandfather was already old. His heart softened. Although his grandfather had always prioritized the Liang family, He still had some sincerity for this grandson of his. As a veteran on the battlefield and a veteran in politics, he immediately sensed the closeness in his grandson's tone. He immediately struck while the iron was hot and said, "Su, if your imperial father still believes that you did this, what will you do?" Xiao Su replied lightly, "Let nature take its course." Although he knew his grandson well and had already guessed, he was still disappointed. Liang Xiang sighed softly. "Your mother is right. You have a cold personality and are unwilling to fight for power with others. Sometimes, this kind of personality is not bad, but it is not suitable at this time." Xiao Su silently looked at the person in front of him. He knew that he had more to say. "Su, don't forget that you are not alone. There are many people behind you. Your mother, the Liang family, and the officials who support you. How can you say that you will let nature take its course? Once nature takes its course, your status as the first successor will be taken away. Can't you see that His Majesty's thoughts are all on the fourth prince?" Liang Xiang said with some disappointment. Since he was young, his mother had always exhorted him. His future was related to the Liang family, so he had to do this and that. The moment his grandfather appeared, he had already guessed his purpose. However, he was still willing to give him a trace of hope. He had come to the prison because he was worried about him. Unfortunately, he sometimes felt quite disappointed because these people had never cherished his expectations. Xiao Su frowned. It is a fact that imperial father favors fourth imperial brother. This prince cannot change it. Ever since fourth imperial brother was born, imperial father's thoughts were very clear. In the past, he did not understand, but now he saw through it. But so what? With you here, the fourth prince's title is not legitimate. Because of your existence, His Majesty does not dare to casually make him the heir apparent. Liang Xiang's tone was a little agitated, as if he did not agree with his somewhat negative attitude. However, he did not understand that Xiao Su was not negative. He just did not want to live a life of open strife and secret struggle. Liang Xiang took a breath and continued, "However, you do not need to worry. Even if His Majesty insists on punishing you this time, we have a plan to cut off all means of retreat. At this point, what good plan does grandfather have?" Xiao Su frowned. Liang Xiang glanced at him, then walked to the table and raised his hand to order some tea. Then, he wrote a word on the wooden table. "Reverse." When Xiao Su saw the word clearly, his eyes narrowed and his expression became serious. "Grandfather, no." Liang Xiang wiped away the word and said angrily, "Why not? You have endured for so many years. Do you still want to be suppressed like this?" Xiao Su's eyes flashed when his grandfather mercilessly exposed the truth of so many years. However, he knew that his grandfather wanted to provoke his anger so that he would agree to his plan. Xiao Su's tone was still strict. "Once this happens, there will be rivers of blood. The implications will be widespread. The title will not be legitimate and the people will be uneasy. External enemies will be waiting for an opportunity to enter. There will be internal and external troubles. Sichuan will be plunged into disaster. In the past few years, Sichuan had been weak. The south was flooded, the north was dry, and there was no harvest. The people had no way to make a living. The neighboring countries were watching covetously and were looking for an opportunity to invade Sichuan. How could he provide this opportunity for external enemies? Liang Xiang looked at his grandson in shock. It was not that he had not thought about these problems, but he did not think that he would be so resolute in his opposition. But wealth comes from danger. Without destruction, there can be no construction. Have you really thought this through? He tried to persuade him again. "Su, I don't want to be a sinner for all eternity." Xiao Su turned his back and replied indifferently. Liang Xiang sighed softly. If your imperial father had put in the effort to understand you, he would not have repeatedly pushed you out of the door. You have the talent to be a general and minister. You have the appearance of a ruler, but it was buried. The unfinished words were buried in the cold and gloomy prison. Xiao Su curved his lips in self-mockery. In reality, he wished that he did not have the identity of a prince. Chapter 144. Liang Xiangjin couldn't persuade him, so he sighed softly. Before he left, he said that he would think of a way to help him safely survive this crisis. If he accepted the plan, he would send someone to contact him at any time. After Xiao Su thanked him, he turned and left. When there was only one person left in the cell, he couldn't help but wonder how the little guy he had angered was doing. Chu Qingyan, who Xiao Su was worried about, had already arrived at the palace gates. She reported her identity and successfully entered the palace. Then, she didn't dare to delay for a moment as she headed towards Chaoyang Palace. Right now, the only thing she could think of was to find Empress Liang. Big Ice Cube was her son. She wouldn't leave him alone. However, there had been no news from the palace recently. She was a bit uneasy and felt that she had to personally go there to be at ease. When she arrived at Chaoyang Palace, Luo Yun and the others had already received the news and were waiting outside the hall. Greetings to ninth young Miss Chu. Luo Yun gave a perfunctory curtsy. This wasn't the time to argue about whether they were respectful or not. Chu Qingyan hurriedly asked, "Is Her Highness the Empress inside?" When Her Highness heard that ninth young miss was coming, she had already gotten up and is waiting inside, Luo Yun replied. Then quickly bring me in. Chu Qingyan didn't want to waste a moment and urged her. Although Luo Yun wasn't very willing to listen to her orders, Her Highness had told her to bring her in, so she turned and led the way. The luxurious and magnificent inner hall was not much different from the magnificence of the main door. Perhaps it was even more exquisite and luxurious. As expected of the residence of the head of the Eastern Palace. Chu Qingyan had stopped outside the palace the previous 2 times and had never entered the palace. This time, however, it was truly an eye-opener. It was a pity that Chu Qingyan was not in the mood to admire the palace at all. Her footsteps were hurried, and she wanted to see Empress Liang as soon as possible. The moment she entered the inner hall, Chu Qingyan saw Empress Liang, who was wearing a gold-embroidered dress, sitting on the main seat. Her eyes were looking out the window as if she was deep in thought. She did not notice that Chu Qingyan had entered. Luo Yun stepped forward and said, "Nyang, you're here." Empress Liang turned her head when she heard this, her eyes gloomy as she looked at the people in the hall. Chu Qingyan had already knelt down in salute. "Qingyan greets Your Highness the Empress." "Long live Your Highness the Empress." Chu Qingyan bowed very respectfully. After all, she had a request to make, so she had to show a proper attitude. Empress Liang didn't let her get up. She picked up the teacup beside her and asked in an unfriendly tone, "Why are you looking for this Empress?" Chu Qingyan didn't care about her attitude at this time. She raised her head and said sincerely, "Reporting to Your Majesty, Qingyan came to the palace this time to ask you to save His Highness." "Su? Where is this Empress's son? This Empress will naturally save him. Is there a need for you to ask for help?" Empress Liang looked at her with displeasure. Chu Qingyan felt like the weight of 1,000 gold, pressuring her to the point that she couldn't breathe. However, Chu Qingyan still straightened her back. Her gaze was sincere and worried as she said, "Your Highness the Empress, you've misunderstood. It's just that His Highness has already been locked up in prison for almost 2 days. Qingyan is a bit worried, so she gathered her courage to enter the palace to see you." When Empress Liang heard this, the teacup in her hand slammed onto the table. Luo Yun hurriedly handed over a handkerchief. Empress Liang pushed her hand away and looked angrily at the person kneeling in the hall. "Are you questioning this Empress's ability? Do you think this Empress doesn't have the heart to save Su? Chu Qingyan, what status are you using to speak to this Empress?" Empress Liang was already annoyed by her father's words today. Now, Chu Qingyan's words made her recall how her father had said that she didn't fulfill her duties as a wife and as the Empress. She couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Her actions, when was it up to a little girl to criticize? Chu Qingyan didn't know where Empress Liang's anger was coming from, but she could come to a conclusion. This Empress Liang was unpredictable. It was no wonder that Ice Cube was always so talkative when interacting with her. She bowed, "Your Highness the Empress, please calm down. Qingyan didn't mean that." At this time, Luo Yun also spoke up, "Master, I don't think she has the guts to slander you. Don't get angry. Your health is more important." Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. Empress Liang took a deep breath, then leaned back in her chair. She looked coldly at Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan, do you want to save Su'er? Chu Qingyan didn't know what she was thinking at this time, but she still nodded, yes. Then come with this Empress to plead with His Majesty. Empress Liang crossed her arms on her knees, her tone serious. As you command. Chu Qingyan immediately responded. She was going to plead with His Majesty, but just as she was about to leave, she heard a palace servant report that Chu Qingyan had entered the palace to seek an audience. She thought that bringing more people along might increase their chances of success. Moreover, Chu Qingyan was the King of England's consort personally bestowed by His Majesty the Emperor Emeritus. Even if His Majesty didn't give her face, he would still be willing to see her. Empress Liang stood up and looked down at her condescendingly. Her tone was cold. Chu Qingyan, your status is too lowly. If you were born in a good family, perhaps you would still be able to speak in front of His Majesty. Perhaps His Majesty would also consider your maternal family and not treat Su'er this way. However, there are no ifs. Your status can't be changed. The phoenix is a phoenix, and a sparrow is a sparrow. Your existence is actually Su'er's weakness. Bringing you along to see His Majesty this time was just a convenience. Later, don't say anything wrong. Otherwise, this Empress won't let you off. After saying this, Empress Liang turned to instruct the palace servants to change their clothes. She no longer looked at Chu Qingyan, who was kneeling there. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. Her eyes were filled with unreconciled anger. Her background was innate. Moreover, she came from the 21st century. Subconsciously, her understanding was deeply ingrained. There was no distinction between high and low. Seeing the Empress belittling her in such a lofty manner, it was impossible to say that she wasn't angry. However, all of her anger was well hidden. This wasn't the time to fall out with the Empress. Big Ice Cube was still in prison. The most important thing was to rescue him. Compared to Big Ice Cube being alone in prison, it was nothing for her to suffer some grievances. After Empress Liang bathed and changed her clothes, Chu Qingyan obediently followed the procession to the imperial study without any obstructions. Eunuch Xiao, is His Majesty inside? When they arrived at the imperial study, Empress Liang asked Eunuch Xiao, who was guarding the door. Eunuch Xiao replied with a radiant smile. His Majesty just returned from Mingchen Hall. Right now, he's inside reviewing memorials. The words Mingchen Hall pierced Empress Liang's heart like needles. His Majesty was accompanying that mother and son every day. It really was too infuriating. After living in the inner palace for so many years, Empress Liang was already familiar with how to hide her emotions. She smiled and said, "Then Eunuch Xiao, help this Empress pass on a message." Hearing this, Eunuch Xiao said with a bit of difficulty, "His Majesty has ordered that he won't see anyone." Empress Liang's expression changed slightly. Chapter 145. Luo Yun said worriedly, "Your Highness, this..." Empress Liang raised her hand to stop Luo Yun from continuing. She looked at the tightly shut palace doors with a forbearing expression. Chu Qingyan was also a bit surprised. Sichuan Emperor had just come over from the mother and son's place, but now he refused to see Empress Liang. This treatment was a bit different. She had heard some rumors before that the current Sichuan Emperor wasn't the first in line to succeed the throne. He had an older brother above him. However, because the Sichuan Emperor often led troops into battle when he was a prince, his political ambitions surpassed those of his older brothers. Moreover, the Sichuan Emperor married the daughter of the heroic Prime Minister Liang. He had a deep foundation and powerful relatives, so he was able to squeeze out his older brothers and successfully become the emperor. It could be said that the Liang family had contributed greatly to the Sichuan Emperor's ascension back then. As for Consort Yu, it was said that she and the Sichuan Emperor were childhood sweethearts and grew up together. Prime Minister Fu wasn't the Prime Minister back then. He was only a grand tutor who taught the Sichuan Emperor. However, Prime Minister Fu was very smart. He had his daughter become the Sichuan Emperor's study companion at a very early age. A talented man and a beautiful woman, so it wasn't difficult for them to fall in love with each other. However, for the sake of the throne, the Sichuan emperor had to choose between his love and power. Therefore, the Sichuan emperor married Liang Yuan and promised Prime Minister Liang that he would marry her with the position of the head of the imperial harem. That was how he received Prime Minister Liang's strong support and became the crown prince. As for the Sichuan emperor, who had betrayed the beauty, after ascending the throne, he immediately married Consort Yu into the palace. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but snort coldly. So Empress Liang was only a springboard for the Sichuan emperor, while Consort Yu was his true love. Should I say that Sichuan emperor is sentimental or heartless? However, he was heartless towards the ice cube's actions. Chu Qingyan was a little angry, but here, everyone was wearing a mask. She didn't show her emotions on her face, so she forced herself to wear a smiling mask. Empress Liang instructed Luo Yun. Luo Yun asked someone to take out something similar to a pillow and put it on the ground. Eunuch Xiao was a little puzzled. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" "Eunuch Xiao, tell His Majesty that I will kneel here. When he wants to see me, I will get up." With that, Empress Liang knelt down on the pillow and straightened her back, looking determined. Eunuch Xiao was shocked by the Empress's actions. This. He couldn't even speak properly. Chu Qingyan immediately knelt down. Since Empress Liang was kneeling, how could she, as her future daughter-in-law, just stand there and watch? Empress Liang's expression softened slightly when she heard a soft sound from behind her. It seemed that this little girl wasn't as unreasonable as she thought. Eunuch Xiao exclaimed when he saw the two kneeling on the ground. He hurriedly went into the hall to report. "Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Empress and the Chu clan's 9th young miss are kneeling outside the hall and asking for an audience," reported Eunuch Xiao. When Sichuan Emperor heard this, his fingers paused in the middle of flipping through memorials. He then continued to flip through them. "We won't see them." Eunuch Xiao responded in a low voice and left the hall. When Empress Liang saw the expression on Eunuch Xiao's face, she already knew the answer. Her fingers twisted the handkerchief as her heart turned cold. She suddenly felt that her father's scolding of her was right. She should have taken charge of the situation at the first moment and not watched from the sidelines, causing Su to fall into this predicament. But there was no turning back now. She continued to kneel, hoping that His Majesty would see her on account of her kneeling for a long time and be lenient. Chu Qingyan was slightly surprised. If this Sichuan emperor was so cold to the master of the harem, then wouldn't this big ice cube be even more? Her eyes were filled with worry. Time slowly passed. Her knees went from stabbing pain to numbness, and then to unbearable pain. She didn't dare to check. She was worried that someone would see it and pass it to Sichuan emperor's ears, saying that her kneeling wasn't sincere at all. She couldn't help but think of the big ice cube kneeling in the cold night on a full moon. Did her knees hurt a lot? Did her calves feel so numb that they no longer belonged to her? Was her back so sore that she couldn't bear it? She had only knelt for 2 hours, and it was already like this. Then what about the big ice cube who had knelt for an entire night? Was it even more uncomfortable? Her eyes were sore. She closed her eyes, feeling extremely distressed. In fact, wasn't the big ice cube's heart more uncomfortable? Being punished by his own father without distinguishing right from wrong, that was the most heart-piercing pain. In order to distract herself from the pain in her knees, Chu Qingyan tried to think of other things. For example, what was the big ice cube doing right now? Were father and mother doing well in the Chu family? Would the Chu family make things difficult for father and mother for this assassination? Did Water Spirit and Turin find a breakthrough in this case? She could think of many things. It seemed that because of this, time really passed very quickly. 2 hours passed, 4 hours passed. The door to the hall was still tightly shut. Everyone was in despair. At this time, Eunuch Xiao opened the door and walked out. Empress Liang looked at him questioningly. Eunuch Xiao sighed slightly. "Esteemed Empress, please return. His Majesty said that no matter how long you kneel here, he won't see you." Empress Liang's expression stiffened slightly, but she quickly covered it up with a faint smile. "It seems that His Majesty is truly very busy. Then I'll have to trouble Eunuch Xiao to pass on a message for this consort. State affairs are important. His Majesty also needs to take care of his own body." As she spoke, she had Luo Yun help her up. In the process, she even stumbled slightly. Chu Qingyan sighed slightly in her heart. This was the concubine by the emperor's side. Even if she suffered, was wronged, or was reprimanded, she still had to welcome it with a smile. Because no matter what the Son of Heaven did, it was a gift. Empress Liang's expression was slightly tired as she looked at Chu Qingyan, who was still kneeling. You should also return. Don't do useless work. Chu Qingyan shook her head. Esteemed Empress, you should return first. Qingyan will continue to kneel for a while. Empress Liang was both physically and mentally exhausted. She couldn't care too much and had Luo Yun help her back to Chaoyang Palace. Chu Qingyan lowered her head slightly. Her knees had already been scraped, and there was a piercing pain. Her white dress, which was stuck to her knees, had already bloomed with plum blossoms. On her snow-white dress, it was a bright red color, but it was also an eye-piercing red. But Chu Qingyan couldn't care about anything else. Even though her head was dizzy and her eyes were dizzy, she still didn't want to give up. She didn't have a superior family background, unparalleled martial arts, or abilities that people feared or could use. But she just wanted to do her best to do something for the big ice cube. Even if His Majesty didn't want to see her, he still had to leave the hall, eat, and rest. So she wasn't afraid that he wouldn't come out. As long as he came out, she would ask how he could bear to wrong his son. The sun was setting in the west. The sky was filled with multicolored light, dyeing the world orange. Chu Qingyan looked at the faint yellow color on the ground, indifferent. At this time, Eunuch Xiao walked in front of her and bowed. Ninth young Miss Chu, His Majesty summons you. Chapter 146. Chu Qingyan thought she had misheard. She raised her head in disbelief to look at the smiling Eunuch Xiao. Did His Majesty summon me? Her tone was uncertain. Eunuch Xiao nodded. He looked at Chu Qingyan, whose lips were white and forehead covered in sweat. He said with some pity, Miss, quickly get up. Don't kneel, the floor is cold. Chu Qingyan immediately nodded. Her hands pushed against the ground as she slowly stood up. The blood had already dried up, but the hem of her skirt was stuck to her wound. When she stood up, it tore and hurt. Her legs were weak and she couldn't stand steadily. She almost knelt down again. Eunuch Xiao hurriedly called for 2 palace maids to support her. After she steadied herself, Chu Qingyan waved her hand and had the palace maids leave. She then turned to Eunuch Xiao and said, Let's go in first. We can't keep His Majesty waiting. Eunuch Xiao was slightly surprised. The young girl in front of him was not delicate and was willing to endure hardships. He couldn't help but have a new level of respect for her. Chu Qingyan did not delay. She endured the pain in her leg and walked into the imperial study. A silver incense burner with gilded bamboo joints as tall as a person leaned against the corner, emitting spirals of incense. The 4-sheep square was placed on the table, the Changshin Palace lantern hung high, and the finely polished jade horn cup was still placed on the corner of the table. Everything was the same as when she first entered the imperial study. However, at that time, her heart had been nervous. Now, it was completely different. Sichuan Emperor sat high behind the table covered in bright yellow embroidery. When she came in, he did not even raise an eyebrow. Chu Qingyan knelt down with difficulty. Greetings to Your Majesty. Long live Your Majesty. Stand up. Sichuan Emperor put away the document in his hand and looked at her. Thank you, Your Majesty. Chu Qingyan slowly stood up. After this set of movements, the back of her clothes was wet. However, she gritted her teeth and endured the pain from her leg. What do you have to say to me? The Sichuan Emperor's face was gloomy. It was impossible to tell if he was happy, angry, or sad. Chu Qingyan raised her head and looked directly at Sichuan Emperor. She said seriously, Your Majesty, His Highness was wrongly accused. He was with Qingyan at that time, so he couldn't have assassinated the 4th prince. Qingyan can testify for His Highness. Sichuan Emperor glanced at her. Sometimes, you don't even need to do it personally. Your alibi doesn't count. Hearing the Sichuan Emperor's tone, it was obvious that he was certain that it was Ice Cube who did it. She couldn't help but feel a little angry, but she still said calmly, Your Majesty, based on your understanding of your son, Do you think he is the kind of person who doesn't care about brotherhood? If that's the case, the fourth prince would have been in danger if His Highness hadn't stepped in to save him when he was attacked on the streets. Do you still think His Highness would harm his own brother? Sichuan Emperor's eyes flashed. It's hard to distinguish between people's hearts. Imperial power and politics aren't as simple as you think. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but want to sneer. Your Majesty, actually, you don't trust His Highness, your son, right? That's why you prejudiced him and sentenced him to death, right? Sichuan Emperor looked slightly angry. Chu Qingyan, are you doubting me? Do you know what the consequences of doubting me are? Chu Qingyan had already decided to throw caution to the wind. She wasn't afraid of his might at all. Your Majesty, how can eggs remain intact when the nest is overturned? If His Highness is convicted, how can Qingyan, as his fiancée, remain unharmed? So, Your Majesty, Qingyan isn't doubting you. She just wants to seek justice for His Highness. I couldn't tell that you were so eloquent and daring. Sichuan Emperor looked at her coldly. Chu Qingyan laughed self-deprecatingly. Your Majesty, it's not that Qingyan wants to disobey you. It's just that His Highness is truly innocent. Let's hear it. Sichuan Emperor snorted coldly. Chu Qingyan curtsied and straightened her back. Your Majesty, do you think someone would be so stupid as to summon the fourth prince in front of so many people and then have someone assassinate him to leave evidence behind? Normal people wouldn't use such a method to frame themselves for injustice. Don't you know that some people do it because they know that such a reason doesn't make sense? That way, it's easier to get rid of suspicion. Sichuan Emperor retorted coldly. Chu Qingyan looked at the person on the throne with bright eyes and said slowly, Your Majesty, but if that person knew that you didn't believe them at all, would they still take such a risk? How dare you? Sichuan Emperor was furious and rebuked coldly. Eunuch Xiao hurriedly stepped forward and patted Sichuan Emperor's back. Your Majesty, please calm down. Chu Qingyan knelt down and fearlessly met Sichuan Emperor's fiery eyes. She said word by word, Your Majesty, it's not that Qingyan wants to provoke you on purpose. It's just that Qingyan has a few words in her heart that she needs to say. Eunuch Xiao saw that she still wanted to say something, so he couldn't help but worry for her. Don't think that we can't touch you just because you're the granddaughter-in-law personally bestowed by the Emperor Emeritus. Sichuan Emperor said angrily. Perhaps it was because no one had dared to talk back to him like this in many years, but he felt that his dignity had been challenged and was burning with rage. Since she had already angered Sichuan Emperor, it didn't matter if she said a few more words. Thus, Chu Qingyan straightened her back and pursed her pale lips. With a straight face, she said unyieldingly, Your Majesty, His Highness is a righteous person. He treats people gently, is intelligent, and has a pure personality. For many years, he has been guarding the borders and maintaining the peace of the country. He has never complained. He does not speak much, but he has always done what he should for the country and the people. You have never praised him or encouraged him, but he has always been so respectful to you. Even when he was falsely accused of assassinating his brother, he only cared about his younger brother's safety. He was never given any expectations, but he never disappointed. Your Majesty, why can't you see that you have such an outstanding son? Chu Qingyan had just said this when she was interrupted by the person above her. Chu Qingyan, are you accusing us of not being a good father, so you're teaching us how to raise a son? His voice was gloomy as he spoke through gritted teeth. It was as if Chu Qingyan nodded, what awaited her would be her head falling to the ground. Chu Qingyan silently nodded in her heart. Such a cold-blooded and heartless person who couldn't distinguish right from wrong was truly not a good father. However, a wise man submits to circumstances. She didn't want to die before she could save the ice cube. Your Majesty, Qingyan didn't mean it that way. Chu Qingyan placed her hands on the ground and bowed respectfully. Sichuan Emperor suppressed his anger. If it weren't for the Emperor Emeritus, he would have already ordered people to drag her out. Get out. We don't want to see you again. Eunuch Xiao immediately came to support Chu Qingyan when he heard this. He said softly, Miss, don't make His Majesty angry again. Let's go. Chu Qingyan took advantage of the situation and stood up, But she didn't plan to let it go. She had knelt for an entire afternoon and still hadn't said enough. As soon as eunuch Xiao saw her bright eyes looking at His Majesty, he knew that this little girl was going to say something that would shock the heavens and make the earth weep. Your Majesty, Qingyan only has one last thing to say. Sichuan Emperor, who originally didn't want to pay attention to Chu Qingyan, looked over when he heard this. His rising and falling chest clearly indicated his current anger. Both the palm and the back of the hand are flesh and blood. I hope your Majesty will reconsider. Chu Qingyan looked at the stunned Sichuan Emperor and bowed before turning to leave the hall. Crash! Chu Qingyan didn't know what had been smashed behind her. She curled her lips. She had cursed all the things she had wanted to say, and her heart was at ease. She had spoken the truth. It was impossible for Sichuan Emperor to punish her for her crimes. It would be good if he sent her to prison. It would fulfill her wish of being locked up with the ice cube. However, she knew that it was impossible to rely on these words to wake Sichuan Emperor up. She had to find another way out. Chapter 147. Your Majesty, please calm down. Don't lower yourself to Miss Chu's level. Eunuch Xiao served a new cup of tea and carefully served it. The debris on the ground had already been cleaned up. Sichuan Emperor angrily took the tea. After taking a sip, he exhaled faintly. Qiao Ji, do you also think that Zhen did something wrong? Eunuch Qiao immediately knelt down in fright. Your Majesty, why would this servant think so? Your Majesty is wise, how could you do something wrong? Sichuan Emperor sighed and waved his hand to let him get up. He always had people around him who flattered him and tried to figure out his thoughts. No one was willing to tell him the truth. That little girl was right about one thing. Both the palm and the back of the hand were his flesh. But he had to give up some things. He always had to give up some things. Eunuch Qiao looked at His Majesty's frown and thought about the little girl who dared to talk back to His Majesty. He couldn't help but admire her. It was rare to see someone who dared to speak to His Majesty like this. Even the ministers rarely disobeyed him and spoke so bluntly. He didn't know if it was because a newborn calf wasn't afraid of a tiger or because one couldn't judge a book by its cover. He thought that if His Royal Highness was able to get out of this one day, then his little princess consort's future would be limitless. Chu Qingyan walked out of the imperial study. Beside her was the little eunuch who had led her here. Chu Qingyan asked the little eunuch to bring her to Mingchen Hall. Although the little eunuch didn't know why she wanted to go to Mingchen Hall, he was still a master. He couldn't refuse and brought her there. Chu Qingyan looked at the sky. The sun was about to set. She had to quickly finish these things before the palace doors were locked. Her legs were still numb, but she couldn't care less. She had a feeling that there wasn't much time left. The trial would begin in 3 days. Even Water Spirit and Hualing couldn't find the truth, let alone the Supreme Court officials. In order to report, they would have to comply with Sichuan Emperor's wishes and testify that Big Ice was the mastermind. Therefore, she had to fight for Big Ice's innocence before then. What she wanted was Xiao Ran. She felt that Xiao Ran would definitely be a breakthrough. Once she arrived at Mingchen Hall, Chu Qingyan was stopped. Chu Qingyan looked at the 2 burly grannies in front of her and smiled. I am Qingyan from the Chu clan. I am here to visit the 4th prince. I wonder if the 2 of you could help me pass on the message? One of the nannies sneered. Our imperial concubine said that no matter who comes, no one is allowed to approach our 4th prince. So, miss, please go back. So it was Consort Yu's orders. Chu Qingyan blinked and smiled. Your 4th prince and I are close friends. If he knows that I'm here to see him, he will definitely be very happy. So, I hope that the 2 of you can make things convenient. Otherwise, if your 4th prince finds out, I'm afraid that he will punish the 2 of you. The 2 nannies looked at each other. Although her imperial concubine had told them to stop people from entering, this person said that she was a good friend of the 4th prince. If the 4th prince were to blame them, then they would lose their positions. Seeing the 2 of them waver, Chu Qingyan wanted to continue speaking. However, she heard a voice that was full of praise but full of derision. What a sharp tongue. 9th young Miss Chu, a day apart feels like 3 years. You really make people have a whole new level of respect for you. Qingyan greets Consort Yu's mother. Your imperial concubine is too kind. Chu Qingyan curtsied in the direction of the person who had just arrived. The person who had just arrived was Consort Yu. The two nannies also hurriedly curtsied. One of the nannies complained, Your imperial concubine, this servant tried to persuade this young miss to leave, but she insisted on staying. This servant tried my best. Consort Yu's cold gaze swept across the two nannies. The two of them couldn't help but shiver. Finally, Consort Yu's gaze landed on Chu Qingyan. She said with a faint smile, Ninth young Miss Chu, I heard that you angered His Majesty quite a bit in the imperial study. Is that true? Chu Qingyan's eyes twitched. It had only been half an hour since the incident in the imperial study, but she didn't expect Consort Yu to already know about it. As expected, there were no secrets in the imperial palace. Chu Qingyan had no intention of offending His Majesty, replied Chu Qingyan with her head lowered. It doesn't matter if you did it intentionally or not. This concubine will give you a piece of advice. If you don't have the ability, then don't even think about taking up the responsibility. Otherwise, if you fall one day, don't say that this concubine didn't warn you. Imperial concubine, you looked at Chu Qingyan, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs, with a hint of mockery in her voice. Back then, she did not punish Chu Qingyan, but now that she saw Chu Qingyan running around for Xiao Su, she felt incomparably happy. Chu Qingyan replied calmly, Many thanks for your imperial concubine Consort Yu's advice. Qingyan will definitely remember it. Consort Yu smiled coldly. She turned to leave, but Chu Qingyan called out to her. Your imperial concubine, could you allow Qingyan to see the fourth prince? Asked Chu Qingyan. Consort Yu turned to look at her coldly. You're not an imperial physician, so why would this concubine allow you to see Rana? Also, you're the family member of the suspect who tried to assassinate my Rana. Why would this concubine risk letting you see Rana? Chu Qingyan calmed herself down. Your imperial concubine Consort Yu, it's impossible for His Highness to assassinate the fourth prince. The two of them have such deep feelings for each other that it's impossible for them to draw their swords against each other. You also know that the mastermind behind the scenes isn't His Highness, so why are you letting the real culprit go unpunished? Ruthlessness flashed through Consort Yu's eyes. Of course she knew that Xiao Su wasn't the culprit. She also knew that the mastermind behind the scenes was someone else. However, she had long wanted to consign Xiao Su to eternal damnation. Thus, this was an opportunity to get rid of the obstacle to Ranner's throne. How could she let it go so easily? This concubine also doesn't know what the truth is. I'll leave everything to the justice of the Supreme Court. This concubine believes that His Majesty will give this concubine and Ranner an explanation. You should stop wasting your time and think of a way to escape. Consort Yu smiled coldly at Chu Qingyan. She then ordered the palace servants, Fourth Prince is still unconscious. What are you all standing around for? Hurry and send them away. If they disturb Fourth Prince's recovery, this concubine will hold you responsible. Yes. The two mama immediately walked up to Chu Qingyan and said unhappily, Let's go, Ninth Miss Chu. Chu Qingyan watched as Consort Yu walked away. She had a plan in her mind. It seemed like Fourth Prince wasn't awake yet, so there was no need for her to stay here. It was better for her to return to the palace and discuss her plan with everyone. Thus, Chu Qingyan raised her head and looked coldly at the two grannies who were chattering non-stop. When the two grannies met her gaze, they were instantly stunned. That aura of power and authority made them lose the ability to speak. By the time they regained their senses, Chu Qingyan had already walked far away. They couldn't help but wonder if those were the eyes of a 10-year-old child. Too terrifying. When Chu Qingyan walked out the palace gates, Hua Ling and the others who had been waiting for a long time came forward to greet her. However, they found that her footsteps were a bit strange and she was limping. Although everyone was surprised, they knew that this wasn't a good time to ask questions, so they silently sent her to the carriage. It was at this time that a voice sounded out, Ninth Miss Chu, can we talk in private? Chapter 148. As soon as the voice fell, Hua Ling and the others immediately became alert. They all approached the carriage and looked at the person who had come. This voice was a bit familiar. Chu Qingyan knit her brows and then she seemed to have thought of something. She lifted the curtain and looked towards the source of the voice. She said with a faint smile, "So it's Miss Xiao. Long time no see, are you well?" The person who came was Yao Yingruo. At this moment, she was also seated in the carriage. A servant girl lifted the curtains for her, revealing her pretty face. She saw that His Highness King Ying's personal guards were surrounding Chu Qingyan and had their hands on her waist. It was as if they would attack her if she showed any disrespect. Yao Yingruo's heart was filled with envy and jealousy once again. What ability did Chu Qingyan have to receive this kind of treatment? She thought about it. If she replaced Chu Qingyan, then these people would be protecting her. Therefore, Yao Yingruo was even more determined in her plan. She said to Chu Qingyan with a smile, "Thanks for Ninth Miss Chu's concern. Everything is fine. I wonder if Ninth Miss Chu is free right now? Yingruo would like to invite Ninth Miss Chu for a cup of tea." Chu Qingyan wanted to refuse, but then she thought about it. The Imperial Palace was not on the same path as the Yao Manor. This person appearing here, it probably wasn't as simple as inviting her for a cup of tea. Then I'll have to thank Miss Xiao. Please lead the way. Chu Qingyan agreed with a smile. Yao Yingruo saw her agree so easily and felt proud. She had the driver turn the carriage around and head forward. "Little princess consort, aren't you worried that this person has some ulterior motives?" Hualing asked with a bit of worry. Ethereal and the others had already returned to the manor in front of the heavenly prison. Right now, only Xining and Hualing were by her side. "It's fine, I'll go meet her." Chu Qingyan was not worried that this person would play any tricks. Beside her was the most powerful cavalry under Big Ice Cube's command, Xiao cavalry. Seeing the young princess' insistence, Hualing nodded. In just a few days, the young princess' actions had made them look at her in a new light. Now, she had become their backbone. Although she was a bit immature, she could barely support the overall situation. So, Hualing turned the carriage around and followed. When they arrived at a tea house, the carriage stopped. Yao Yingruo got off and said to Chu Qingyan, "This is the place." Chu Qingyan nodded. She held Xining's hand and followed her slowly. Yao Yingruo noticed her legs and curled her lips. She turned around and walked up the stairs. Xining was about to remind her master that her leg was injured and she couldn't go upstairs, but she was stopped by her master. Chu Qingyan shook her head. "It's nothing." Most of the people downstairs were single customers, and there was no independent space. If this person wanted to talk to him in private, she wouldn't do it in such a noisy place. He hoped that Yao Yingruo wouldn't disappoint him. Otherwise, he would have wasted his effort in enduring the pain in his leg to go upstairs. The group entered a private room. Yao Yingruo asked, "What kind of tea does Ninth Miss Chu want to drink?" "As you wish, the guest will follow the host's wishes." Chu Qingyan sat down and smiled faintly. "Even though it's already autumn, the weather is still a bit dry. Why don't we order some flower tea to relieve the heat?" Yao Yingruo turned around and said to the waiter, "Give me a pot of chrysanthemum tea and 2 plates of pastries." But the waiter agreed and left. This tea house served the tea very quickly. Even the pastries were prepared. Chu Qingyan looked at the rising steam in front of her and smiled faintly. "What business does Miss Yao have with Qingyan? When we first met on the street that day, Yingruo felt that Ninth Miss Chu was a clever and obedient little sister. I've always wanted to find a chance to get to know Ninth Miss Chu." Yao Yingruo said to Chu Qingyan with a smile. Chu Qingyan smiled faintly and said, "You're too polite. Then let's talk about some intimate things. Can you?" Yao Yingruo looked at Hualing and Xining behind her and hesitated to speak. Chu Qingyan knew what she meant and had Hualing and Xining leave. Hualing said worriedly, "Little Princess Fei, this subordinate will be outside. Call this subordinate if you need anything." Chu Qingyan nodded and the two left. Yao Yingruo said sarcastically, "The subordinates of the King of England are really loyal to Mimi. Yingruo is envious." Chu Qingyan felt that the word Mimi sounded a bit strange. Were people from ancient times all so familiar with each other? Also, she felt that Yao Yingruo's words were a bit strange ever since she entered this tea house. It was a bit grating. Chu Qingyan avoided her words. She didn't want to tangle with her and said directly, Miss Yao, what business do you have with me? Why don't you say it? Yao Yingrua was a bit surprised that Chu Qingyan went straight to the point. It seemed that this person wasn't stupid even though she was young. She knew that she had business with her, so she slowly poured tea for the two of them and slowly said, His Highness the Fourth Prince was assassinated and His Royal Highness was imprisoned. The court is panicking and rumors are spreading in the capital. Mimi must be very worried. Has the King of England's Fu thought of a countermeasure to save His Royal Highness? Chu Qingyan understood a bit. Last time on the street, she had struck up a conversation with the big ice cube. She must have admired the big ice cube. She said faintly, Miss Yao, my highness has been wronged. His Majesty will definitely clear my highness' name. When Yao Yingrua heard her say, my highness, her heart felt like it had been stabbed. She said with a fake smile, Mimi should know that this matter won't be resolved so easily, right? Chu Qingyan frowned. What do you mean? It's no secret that His Royal Highness is not favored. Will the person in that position let go of this opportunity? Yao Yingrua didn't mention who that person was, but Chu Qingyan's heart sank because she had just met him today. Yao Yingrua saw her pale face and smiled proudly. But His Royal Highness can be cleared of suspicion. This sentence successfully attracted Chu Qingyan's attention. She raised her head and looked at her. I'd like to hear the details. My grandfather is the current Grand Tutor. There are countless students under him. As long as they jointly write a petition, His Majesty will be afraid. After all, talents are a scarce resource in the Sichuan. Therefore, His Majesty won't risk the world to convict His Royal Highness. Yao Yingrua looked at her fingernails and said unhurriedly. Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows. What's your condition? When a weasel pays a New Year's greetings to a chicken, it always has bad intentions. She didn't believe that Yao Yingrua would be willing to help for free. Yao Yingrua raised her head and saw the clear look in her eyes. She suddenly felt that it was a little dazzling. Why did the curve of her lips have the shadow of His Royal Highness? Mimi, you're really smart. Of course, you'll succeed in everything you do. If you have something to say, just say it. Chu Qingyan interrupted her boasting and looked at her coldly. Yao Yingrua sneered. Since you've made it clear, then I'll say it directly. I can ask my grandfather to save His Royal Highness, but the condition is that you have to leave His Royal Highness. Chapter 149. What? Chu Qingyan looked at her in disbelief. Is Miss Yao joking? I can say anything, but I don't know how to joke. Younger sister, do you want to consider it? If His Royal Highness is convicted, then as the future princess consort, it will be difficult for you to escape. Why don't you agree to my conditions? You're not suited for this official life anyway, so why don't you get rid of it as soon as possible? I'll send you away safely and even prepare the money you need. I'll guarantee that you won't have to worry for the rest of your life. Chu Qingyan sneered in her heart. She really treated her like a child. As the granddaughter of a grand tutor, how much wealth could she have? Moreover, if she agreed to her plan, what awaited her wouldn't be freedom, but a path of no return. Could it be that Miss Yao is suited for it? She retorted. Younger sister doesn't need to worry about whether I'm suited for it or not. Yao Yingrua picked up the teacup and took a sip. She smiled back at her. Chu Qingyan tapped her fingers on the table and calmly said, Miss Yao, I appreciate your good intentions, but I'm afraid I can't agree. If His Highness knows that I'm using this kind of price to exchange for him, he'll probably be angry. I don't want him to be angry. Even if I'm convicted in the end, I'm willing to accompany him. Yao Yingrua didn't expect this answer. She wasn't willing to give up and continued, Aren't you afraid of death? Who isn't afraid? But it depends on who I'm with. If it was with the big ice cube, she wasn't afraid. Chu Qingyan stood up and smiled. Miss Yao, you should call Qingyan by her name when you see her in the future. Qingyan can't accept being called younger sister. Yao Yingrua was stunned. Chu Qingyan stopped before she left and turned around to look at her. But there's one thing I think you do have a good point. Everyone outside thinks that His Highness is ugly and frightening and doesn't want to get close to him, but you have a special liking for him. It can be seen that you have good taste. Chu Qingyan raised her teacup. The tea is not bad. Thank you for your hospitality. Yao Yingrua watched her leave with a gloomy face. Of course, she had good taste. 7 years ago, when the King of England led the army to repel the enemy and return to protect the country, she saw him riding on a warhorse and was already fascinated. No, it was even earlier than 8 years ago. She was still a child who didn't know anything. She went to the temple with her family but got separated. She hid under a tree and cried. She met him by chance and he casually asked the guards to bring her back. She would never forget that when he turned around, his silver mask had accidentally fallen off. She had hurriedly picked it up and handed it to him, only to see that peerless face. She had thought that she would never see such a handsome young man again in her life. He took the mask. The personal guard asked if he wanted to silence the witness. He hesitated and said, "Forget it." That was why she was able to survive until now. In the end, under the warning of his personal guard, she left with him in a daze. After that, she never had such close contact with him again. How lucky she was to have met him back then. Her heart had been lost just like that. The King of England was not as bad as the rumors said. He was a peerless handsome man. He was knowledgeable and resourceful. She would be happy to be with such a man for the rest of her life. He fulfilled all of her expectations of a partner when she was young. So she had always been looking for an opportunity to get close to him, wanting to ask him if he still remembered that little girl from back then. But year after year, he spent very little time in the capital. If he wasn't training outside, he was leading troops on an expedition. When he returned this year, an imperial edict bestowing a marriage had been passed down, killing all of her hopes. Today, she did not hesitate to threaten Chu Qingyan and ask her to leave. She was not sure if she had the chance to sit in that position, but she believed that with the attitude of the people in the capital who avoided the King of England, she had a 90% chance of winning. In addition, her grandfather was the imperial tutor and her father was the teacher of the fourth prince. She was not afraid that she would not have a chance. That was a piece of unpolished jade. She did not expect that Chu Qingyan would get it. She also did not expect that Chu Qingyan would reject her like this. Yao Yingrua gritted her teeth. "Chu Qingyan, there will be a day when I defeat you." Chu Qingyan left the room. Hualing's expression was a bit strange, but she was not feeling well right now, so she did not ask any questions. The group hurried back to the palace. Just as she stepped into the main courtyard, she was met with a bear hug from her father. Kai, father really wants to stick a spring onion." Chu Qingyan's eyes became hot. "Father, don't worry, I will save the spring onion." Father Chu cried a few times and Mother Chu on the side noticed that something was wrong with her daughter. She immediately pulled Father Chu away and asked worriedly, Kai, what's wrong with your leg? Why can't you walk properly?" Chu Qingyan laughed softly and comforted her worried mother. "It's fine, it's just a bit bruised. I'll just apply some medicine later. Ethereal's medicine is very good. Last time I accidentally cut my hand and sprinkled some medicine on it, but it didn't even leave a scar." Mother Chu was still a bit worried and supported her daughter into the courtyard. Father Chu looked at his daughter who was limping and thought about Blockhead and Black Impermanence who were at their wits' end this afternoon. He had a plan in his heart and disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Mother Chu pulled up her daughter's trousers and saw the bloody wound. Mother Chu could not hold back and her eyes turned red. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. If she had known earlier, she would not have let her mother help her apply medicine. However, her mother did not ask much. She took the medicine from Xining's hand and carefully applied it for her. Seeing that her mother did not dare to use too much force, Chu Qingyan was filled with emotion. "Mother, I feel that I'm very blessed. It's so good to have father and mother's love." Mother Chu's melancholy disappeared with her words. She shook her head and said with a smile, "Which parent in the world doesn't love their children?" Chu Qingyan was a bit sad when she heard this. Yes, the big ice cube was a child that her parents did not love. However, she only dared to say this in her heart. She did not dare to say it out loud for fear of bringing disaster to her parents. After treating the wound, Chu Qingyan looked at the sky. It was already night. She let her parents stay the night and instructed the servants to inform the Chu estate. Suddenly not seeing her father, Chu Qingyan could not help but get out of bed and go out of the room to look for him. She found her father squatting in a corner with his back facing her. She could not help but walk up to him. However, she heard a strange grinding sound. "Father, what are you doing?" Seeing that it was his daughter, Father Chu raised his hand and proudly showed off the large knife he had stolen from Blockhead. "I'm sharpening the knife." Sharpening the knife for what? Chu Qingyan could not squat down anymore. She leaned against the wall and asked curiously. "I'm sharpening the knife until it's smooth and sharp. Then we can go to the imperial prison and rescue the inverted onion." Father Chu lowered his head and continued to sharpen the stone. "Father wants to break the prison?" Chu Qingyan was a bit amused, but she was also a bit moved. "Father, aren't you afraid? I just want to rescue the inverted onion. It doesn't matter if I'm afraid or not." Chapter 150. Inside Mingchen Hall, Xiao Ran slowly woke up and was pleasantly surprised by the people in the room. Consort Yu sent someone to invite an imperial physician. After treatment, the imperial physician said that as long as he recuperated well, he would be able to get out of bed in a few days. Consort Yu was overjoyed and rewarded the imperial physician. She ordered someone to prepare a tonic soup. Mingchen Hall was immediately thrown into confusion, but everyone was happy. However, Xiao Ran was not happy. When he woke up, he took advantage of his mother's absence to ask Xiang Yu about what had happened in the past few days. Xiang Yu told him everything about His Royal Highness. Xiao Ran could no longer sit still. At this time, Consort Yu came in. Seeing that he was about to get out of bed, she immediately stopped him. "Your injuries haven't healed yet. Why are you in such a hurry to get out of bed?" "Mother, eldest brother is innocent. I want to explain to Imperial Father that it was someone else who tried to assassinate I." Xiao Ran struggled to get out of bed, but unexpectedly heard his mother's cold order. "Someone come, close the doors to the hall. Don't let the fourth prince take a single step out." "Mother, what are you doing?" Xiao Ran was stunned. He only heard his mother say in a voice that only he could hear, "Silly child, this is a rare opportunity. If you don't get rid of the King of England, with your abilities, it will be too difficult for you to compete with him." Xiao Ran stared dumbfoundedly at his mother, who was usually gentle, but now had an expression that he couldn't see clearly. "Mother, this son has never thought of competing with eldest imperial brother. It's not important whether you want to or not. There will come a day when someone will force you to go on stage even if you don't want to." Consort Yu looked into his eyes and said with a serious expression. But Xiao Ran could not accept it. "Be good. Don't you like that little girl from the Chu family? Imperial concubine mother promises that once this matter is over, I will take her to be your concubine or concubine, as long as you are happy." Imperial concubine Moon gently stroked his head as she spoke in a gentle voice. Xiao Ran was a little tempted when he heard this, but he quickly overturned this idea. Taking advantage of someone in a perilous situation was against the morals of a person. He shook his head and said firmly, "The saints said that there are things that a gentleman should do, and things that he should not do. Imperial mother, please let I go see Imperial father." "No, put away your saintly words. Mother will not agree to this. If you dare to take a single step out of Mingchen Hall, everyone here will be beheaded." After speaking, Consort Yu ordered the guards to increase the security, then left angrily. Xiao Ran clutched the wound on his chest as he lay on the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. Why did everything become like this? His eldest brother was his closest brother. How could he sit by and do nothing? How did Imperial concubine mother become like this? How was he going to face Qing Yan in the future? Xiao Ran's face was filled with despair. When Chu Qingyan, who was leaning against the wall, heard her father's words, her heart was moved. A prison break. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of it before. Moreover, she had said in front of Big Ice Cube that if all their methods were useless, then she would bring people to break the prison. Seeing the figure hanging down beside her, Chu Qingyan did not even turn her head as she asked, "The worst plan is to break the prison. What are the chances of success?" 80%. Hua Ling jumped down from the wall and replied without asking anything. Add another 10%. Turin walked out and followed up, unless there's a 10% chance. Chu Qingyan suddenly felt a bit proud, a bit gratified, a bit emotional, a bit regretful, and a bit moved. He was proud that Big Ice Cube had such elites under his command. He was gratified that Big Ice Cube had fierce cavalry by his side all these years. He was moved that he was able to meet them, but regretted that Big Ice Cube was not able to use him. He was moved by the deep friendship between them. Unless it's the last moment, we definitely won't use this method. Once they broke the prison, Big Ice Cube's reputation would be ruined and he would have to admit that she was the mastermind behind the scenes. It would also determine his life as a fugitive. She would not allow Big Ice Cube to live the rest of his life like this. Turin and Hualing nodded. They had thought of this method before, but they were more worried about their master's attitude. Hearing the little princess say this, the two of them let out a sigh of relief. Chu Qingyan leaned against the wall in thought. She thought of what Yao Yingrua said today and a spark suddenly flashed in her mind. She clapped her hands and thought of an idea. That's right, is there anyone that His Majesty respects, or someone that His Majesty would listen to, or someone that he would give some face to? Today, she had begged Empress Liang, begged Sichuan Emperor, begged Consort Yu, but she had received nothing in the end. It was better to rely on herself than on others. She would find a method herself and save Big Ice Cube herself. Although she still had to ask for help in the end, she still had a high chance of winning. Hualing and Turin were stunned when they heard this. Someone that His Majesty respected? Someone that His Majesty would listen to? Someone that His Majesty would give some face to? Wasn't that the retired emperor? Little princess, the retired emperor. If it's the retired emperor, he will definitely save master. Hualing was a little excited. They had truly become muddle-headed. How could they forget such an important savior like the retired emperor? Turin nodded in agreement. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up. That was the retired emperor that pointed her out to Big Ice Cube? All right, Turin, continue to investigate the whereabouts of that assassin. Hualing, inform Water Spirit that she must find traces of the retired emperor. The two sides will work together and try to make progress in 3 days. Although she had not eaten for a day, it did not affect her excitement. If the news of Big Ice Cube being imprisoned was spread, then the retired emperor would definitely come back if he heard about it. She hoped that the retired emperor would really pity Big Ice Cube. The Earth Spirit and the Fire Spirit immediately accepted the order and left. Their footsteps also became much lighter. Although the retired emperor's whereabouts were uncertain and Master had not heard any news about him, if they used all the manpower and resources of the valiant cavalry and dug 3 feet into the ground, they did not believe that they would not be able to find him. At this time, Father Chu, who had skipped away, came back. At the same time, he brought back a message from Mother Chu, telling her to go back to the courtyard to eat. Chu Qingyan also had a bit of appetite at this time. She was about to leave with her father when she saw someone rushing over. Little princess, there is an old beggar outside. He is hanging around the door and won't leave, saying that our king's palace owes him a meal. Normally, this kind of beggar was not uncommon, but this was the first time he had seen such a righteous person. If this was a normal time, he would just give him a meal, but this person was asking for a yard after getting an inch. He said that he wanted to have dinner with the king's palace's master, otherwise he would not eat. This person must have come to find trouble, but recently, something had happened in the palace. The guards did not dare to blatantly chase him away, fearing that they would give him a reason. However, it was not good to have someone hanging around the door, so housekeeper Bai immediately sent him to ask the little princess. Chu Qingyan did not think that there would be such a strange thing. She was thinking about how to deal with it, but she saw her father excitedly running out of the palace, saying that he wanted to see this old beggar. Chu Qingyan held her forehead and could only support her body to slowly walk over. Then she would also go and see this person. Chapter 151. The moment Chu Qingyan stepped out of the door, she saw her father squatting at the side. In front of him sat a white-haired old man dressed in rags. His face was covered in mud, and so were his clothes. They were all over the place, and it was impossible to tell the original state of his clothes. White Tiger stood at the side. When he saw the young princess consort come out, he respectfully said, "Young princess consort, this is the old beggar who refused to leave." Chu Qingyan nodded. "You can go and attend to your own matters first." White Tiger acknowledged and left. When she had entered the Fu, this White Tiger had made things difficult for her. But in the past few days, perhaps he had seen that the situation had changed, so he was even more respectful towards her. She could not find a single mistake in the way he did things. Presumably, he was also afraid that she would take the opportunity to make things difficult for him. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes. She did not have so much free time to take revenge on others. Chu Qingyan walked in front of the two people who were staring at each other. She did not look at the old man anymore, but asked, "Old grandpa, is there anything that you need that the King of England's Fu can help you with?" Perhaps this person was here to find trouble, but an old man should take care of other people's elders. Chu Qingyan had always been respectful towards the elderly. That old man had already seen Chu Qingyan come out. He sized her up from the corner of his eyes. She was steady and virtuous, with a pretty appearance. He was quite satisfied in his heart. Seeing her attitude towards the steward, he was even more satisfied. It seemed that she could already make decisions in the King of England's Fu. This old man knows fortune-telling. His voice was loud and clear, full of energy. Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. Could it be that another quack had come? "We don't need fortune-telling." The old man did not seem to hear her reply and continued, "Your Fu is in big trouble and needs the help of an important person." Chu Qingyan instantly narrowed her eyes. The person she had asked Turin and Hualing to find was someone who could save the big ice cube. She could not help but ask, "Who is the important person that the old man is referring to?" The old man stroked his tangled beard, then stood up. He was a few heads taller than Chu Qingyan. Even if he lost, he did not lose. Chu Qingyan took a few steps back, trying not to look up at him. Seeing her small movements, the old man did not care. He stretched his hands and waved at her casually. "This old man wants to bathe, eat, and rest." "Okay." Chu Qingyan did not hesitate. Xining was shocked by her master's forthright attitude. The old man gave Chu Qingyan a look that said, "At least you know how to behave," then casually walked into the Fu. Chu Qingyan instructed Xining to order people to prepare. Chu Qingyan watched the old man leisurely walk into the Fu with his hands behind his back. Although he looked a little funny, she could not laugh. At this time, her father came over and said uncertainly, Kai, I think I've seen this person somewhere before, but I can't remember where." She slightly curled her lips when she heard that, then said to her father, "Maybe we've found our savior this time." When Father Chu heard that, he was a little confused. Chu Qingyan did not care about anything else and immediately brought her father into the Fu. The old man wanted to bathe, so Chu Qingyan ordered people to bring him to the room. But not long after, Hong Yi came to report that the old man's clothes were freshly made. He wanted the most expensive spices to bathe, and he also wanted people to help him bathe. He wanted this and that. Even the head of the inner courtyard, Hong Yi, had a headache because of him. As if she had expected this person to be so difficult, Chu Qingyan only smiled when she heard that, satisfy whatever he wants. If the Fu does not have it, send people to buy it. Don't let him wait too long. Hong Yi was a little confused, but still went to do as she was told. Chu Qingyan stood outside the room and watched as buckets of black water were sent out. The corners of her eyes twitched. How many days had it been since he last bathed? An hour later, the door to the room was pushed open, and a noble old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion walked out. His head of messy white hair had been tied up high, and he looked neat and tidy from head to toe. At this moment, he was stroking his smooth beard, and the corners of his mouth curled up in satisfaction. When Chu Qingyan saw him, he looked just like an old urchin. Kai, clothes make the man, and gold make the Buddha, right? Father Chu said with a wink. Chu Qingyan nodded, and at this moment, the old man had already walked in front of her and was shouting, "Rice, rice, rice, this old man wants to eat." The moment he spoke, his noble aura was gone, and he only gave off the feeling of an old grandpa next door. Chu Qingyan laughed in spite of herself and raised her hands to bow. "This way, please." Huang Yi had always been fast at preparing food. When Chu Qingyan entered the drawing room, the table was already filled with all kinds of delicacies. The old man entered the drawing room and saw the table full of dishes. His eyes flashed and he casually asked, "Did you make all these dishes?" "No, my family's maidservant made them." Chu Qingyan did not understand why he would ask this, but she still answered honestly. However, the old man's expression immediately changed. "I'm not eating, you don't have any sincerity at all." Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes at the ceiling. Could it be that he wanted to eat the food she made? Hua Ling had just returned when he heard that someone had come to the Fu to cause trouble. When he walked into the drawing room, he heard that the other party wanted the young princess to cook, and he instantly flew into a rage. When he rushed over to drag the person out, he was stopped by his young princess. She mysteriously shook her head at him, and then calmly turned around to say to the old man, "Old grandpa, my family's maidservant is very good at cooking. I guarantee that you will want a second meal after the first. My cooking isn't good, but if you really want to eat, I can make some pastries for you. Right now, you are also hungry, so don't fuss over this. Otherwise, it won't be good if you get a stomach ache. What do you think?" The old man looked at the fragrant dishes on the table and was a bit moved. Seeing that he was wavering, Chu Qingyan did not wait for him to reply and said, "Then eat something light to fill your stomach first, and then eat the fish." Hearing this faintly concerned tone, the old man looked at her with an unreadable expression. He then pretended to be impatient as he said, "Go, go, so long-winded." Chu Qingyan smiled, and then ordered Hong Yi and Xining to take care of the good man. She went down to prepare the pastries. When she returned to the drawing room with the pastries, there was only a mess of cups and plates left on the table. Chu Qingyan looked at the two large felines caressing their stomachs and her eyes couldn't help but twitch. The old man saw her come in and complained, "Good dishes go with good wine. Why didn't you prepare wine for this old man?" Chu Qingyan put down the pastries and said with a serious expression, "You shouldn't drink wine on an empty stomach, it's harmful to the body." The old man rubbed his nose and snorted, "You really care too much." At this time, receiving the news that the Emperor Emeritus had entered the city, Turin immediately rushed into the Fu. He wanted to tell the young princess this great news, but when he stepped into the drawing room and saw the person sitting there, he immediately knelt down with a plop. "Emperor Emeritus is well." Emperor Emeritus? Everyone present was shocked at first, and then they all knelt down in a panic. Only Chu Qingyan had a smile on her lips as she slowly bent down. Chapter 152. The Emperor Emeritus stroked his beard, looking down in satisfaction at the flustered crowd below, but when he saw that small figure, he raised his brows. "Yen lass, you recognized us long ago?" Upon hearing the words "Yen lass," Chu Qingyan knew that she had passed his test. She immediately raised her head and replied, reporting to Imperial Grandfather, Qingyan wasn't very sure at the beginning. The moment she finished speaking, the Emperor Emeritus's hearty laughter was heard. "You're indeed the granddaughter-in-law that I chose." Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. If it weren't for you, this old swindler, she wouldn't be living in this abyss of suffering in politics. Imperial Grandfather, then what about His Highness? Chu Qingyan didn't mince her words and directly asked. Anyway, since this Emperor Emeritus appeared here at this time, it proved that he had the intention to save the big ice cube. The Emperor Emeritus looked at her in dissatisfaction. "You let us eat and drink to our fill, and now you intend to use us?" Chu Qingyan coughed lightly, not wanting to admit it. When the Emperor Emeritus saw this, he waved his hand and stood up. Not going, us hasn't rested yet. It's not like that rascal hasn't suffered before. The imperial prison is nothing to him, and he won't die even if he stays in there for another day. Where is us room?" Chu Qingyan felt that this Emperor Emeritus was really willful, but he was the most senior. Moreover, she could hear that he was intimate with the big ice cube from his words. Chu Qingyan's heart relaxed, and she didn't harp on this matter anymore. She instructed people to prepare a good room and had someone bring him down. Seeing that her father wanted to follow, Chu Qingyan hurriedly pulled him back. "Father, you should also go bathe and rest. It's getting late." Father Chu rubbed his round belly, feeling that his daughter's suggestion was very good. Thus, he pulled out the large knife at his waist and placed it in his daughter's hand. If that Emperor Emeritus wants to break the prison, give this large knife to him. I've sharpened it very well. Chu Qingyan held the large knife that had been sharpened to the point that it was hard to tell which was the blade and which was the back. She wanted to cry but had no tears as she nodded. The night passed. After Chu Qingyan finished washing up, she heard Hong Yi report that the Emperor Emeritus had entered the palace early in the morning. Chu Qingyan smiled when she heard this. It seemed that Imperial Grandfather was even more anxious than her. The Sichuan Emperor had just finished his morning court session. As soon as he walked into the imperial study, he saw a figure casually sitting in his seat. He was about to get angry, but when he saw who was sitting there, he couldn't believe it. "Father, why are you back?" The retired emperor, who had closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, raised his head and shot him a glance. "Not coming back? Don't tell me that my grandson is being wrongly accused by you?" "Father." Sichuan Emperor smiled awkwardly. Seeing him like this, the retired emperor immediately became angry. "Kneel down." Sichuan Emperor was a little embarrassed, but he still knelt down in fear of his father's majesty. As soon as he knelt down, the official documents on the table fell with a clatter. Sichuan Emperor didn't dare to resist, so he could only accept it. "You unfilial son, I gave you the country, gave you the throne, gave you power, and you tossed it around like this? Do you know how much I suffered this time? In order to rush back, I didn't eat my fill for 3 days, slept in the open, and didn't even take a bath. You unfilial son, how can you face me like this?" The retired emperor scolded as he smashed the documents. Sichuan Emperor wanted to cry but had no tears. It turned out that his father was complaining that he made his father suffer. "Father, don't smash anymore. In any case, I am the ruler of a country. Let I get up first." Hearing this, the retired emperor raised his eyebrows. "You can't stand kneeling like this? Then why didn't you think about whether Su and granddaughter-in-law would be able to stand it when they were kneeling?" Sichuan Emperor's expression changed slightly. The retired emperor didn't want to make things difficult for him anymore, so he casually waved his hand to let him get up. "You've been idling about all day long. Instead of studying the state affairs, you only think about those useless things. Sooner or later, Su, such a well-behaved prince, will also be tormented by you. When that time comes, you'll cry." The retired emperor scolded fiercely. Sichuan Emperor didn't say a word. He wasn't as unbearable as his father made him out to be. Moreover, he didn't think that Sichuan would be affected without Su. However, he didn't dare to say these words in front of his father. After venting his anger, the retired emperor stood up and looked at Sichuan Emperor. "All right, heaven's secrets can't be revealed, so I won't say anything more. If you don't release Su, I won't acknowledge you as my son." "I understand." Sichuan Emperor could only agree. In the deep and serene prison, Xiao Su couldn't help but frown when he heard the prison door open and eunuch Xiao walk in. "His Royal Highness, His Majesty invites you in." Xiao Su agreed. They left the prison and entered the imperial palace. When Xiao Su saw the person sitting on the throne, he bowed and knelt down to pay his respects. "Greetings, Imperial Father." Sichuan Emperor sized up the person on the ground. His entire body was cold. A few days in prison didn't dampen his spirit at all. Sichuan Emperor moved his lips. His forehead still hurt from being hit by his father, so he spoke insincerely. "I've wronged you these past few days." Xiao Su's eyes moved, and he replied in a low voice, "Imperial Father, you're exaggerating." Sichuan Emperor was instantly disappointed. This child never acted coquettishly or spoke softly to him. He was too different from Ranner. This son of his had never been close to him. Sichuan Emperor put away his self-blame and sat upright in his seat, regaining the imposing manner of an emperor. "The real mastermind behind the assassination of your fourth imperial brother has been found. After investigation, it's confirmed that it has nothing to do with you. You can rest assured." Xiao Su frowned slightly. What happened these past few days that made Imperial Father change his mind? That's right, he didn't believe that with that person's methods, Imperial Father would be able to find the real culprits so quickly. Therefore, this mastermind was probably just a scapegoat. Many thanks, Imperial Father, for proving Ai's innocence, Xiao Su replied respectfully without a trace of grievance or dissatisfaction. Sichuan Emperor nodded in satisfaction, then said, "Since that's the case, Imperial Father has something for you to do." "Please speak, Imperial Father," Xiao Su replied. "Yesterday, scouts reported that they found traces of ore in the Fuli mountain range. Imperial Father wants to send you to verify it. If it's true, then Sichuan's military strength will increase by another level," Sichuan Emperor said seriously as he stroked his beard. Xiao Su's eyes suddenly darkened, and then became as deep as the night. However, he quickly cupped his hands and replied, "I will obey." "Good, but I have other things to tell you on the way," Sichuan Emperor said in a good mood. "I'll do as Imperial Father says," Xiao Su said indifferently. That day, the King of England, Xiao Su, and Sichuan Emperor spent an entire day in the Imperial study, but no one knew what they talked about. When the Imperial study opened, Xiao Su walked out into the sunlight. However, the warm light couldn't illuminate the desolation in his heart. "I will postpone the appointment of the Crown Prince. You can go in peace." He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to return from this trip. What? Secret mission? Xiao Su laughed self-deprecatingly. He increasingly felt that this palace was cold and unfamiliar. Chapter 153. Reporting to Master, His Royal Highness has been released. The man in black bowed respectfully as he reported. Standing in front of him was the sickly third prince, Xiao Ho, holding fish food in one hand and feeding the goldfish in the pond. Xiao Ho was dressed in a snow-white prince's brocade robe. It was clearly early autumn, but he was covered with a large coat, making him look even paler. If Chu Qingyan saw him, she would definitely think that he was a sickly beauty with a beauty that could captivate even the birds and beasts. Hearing his subordinate's report, Xiao Ho smiled disapprovingly. "I already guessed it after you failed to assassinate fourth brother. It's this subordinate's fault for not being able to complete the mission." The man in black knelt and blamed himself. Xiao Ho raised his hand. "You have already received your punishment, but you accidentally caused eldest brother to lose trust in Imperial Father. I'm afraid that the gap between eldest brother and fourth brother, and between consort you and the Empress, will become bigger and bigger. I'm happy to see this happen." The man in black nodded and asked, "Then Master, His Majesty sent the eldest prince to investigate the mines in Fuli mountain range. Do we need to act?" Xiao Ho smiled faintly. "Do you really think that Fuli mountain range is a mining trip? That's just Imperial Father's scheme. Sometimes I also sympathize with eldest brother. Imperial Father was just indifferent to him. But towards eldest brother, he was pressuring him step by step. He suddenly had some expectations. What kind of changes would there be in the future?" The man in black was somewhat puzzled. Xiao Ho felt that there was no need to explain to his subordinate. "Suppress all actions for now and wait for changes." "Yes." The man in black retreated. Xiao Ho lowered his head to look at the goldfish swimming freely in the pond, revealing a faint sneer. "Death is at hand and you still don't know?" He casually threw the fish food in his hand into the pond, and the school of fish swarmed over to snatch it. Xiao Ho smiled cruelly, then turned and left. Soon after, white bellies floated up from the fish pond one after another. "Slaughter them all." In the house of the King of England, Chu Qingyan was restless. From time to time, she would go out to take a look and then come back, waiting anxiously. I say, Yen lass, don't keep swaying in front of this old man. This old man's eyes are about to blossom from being swayed by you." The retired emperor held a pastry in one hand and a teacup in the other. His mouth was full of pastry crumbs as he muttered. Chu Qingyan shook his head. "I'm just worried. I can't sit still." The retired emperor rolled his eyes and turned to ask Father Chu, "Huan, I can understand why your daughter is walking around, but why are you following her blindly?" Mr. Chu scratched his head. I'm also worried that my family won't be able to sit still. The retired emperor spat out all the pastries in his mouth. What was that? He imagined his tall and strong grandson being turned into a green onion. That scene was so beautiful that he didn't dare to imagine it. Yenlas, this old man already told you that His Highness will be released today. Just wait patiently. If you have nothing to do, go make a few plates of pastries for this old man. The egg yolk and green tea tart from last night were pretty good. Make a few more plates. Thinking of the pastries that he had never seen last night, he couldn't help but drool. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up, as if she had seen something. She casually replied, I'm afraid that Qingyan doesn't have time. With that, she ran forward like a wisp of smoke. The retired emperor slapped the table. This lass was too impudent. But before he could reprimand her, she had already disappeared. He couldn't help but ask Father Chu, what's wrong? Where did she run off to again? He went to pick up my family, Mr. Chu said with a grin. Then why didn't you go? The retired emperor asked in confusion. Who knew that as soon as he finished speaking, Father Chu rolled his eyes. I don't want to be a lantern. What do you mean? The retired emperor felt that sometimes he couldn't understand what this father and daughter were talking about. Could it be that he had been away from the capital for too long and couldn't keep up with the changes? You're a third wheel. But you won't understand even if I tell you. Father Chu waved his hand and walked into the inner courtyard with his hands behind his back. I'm going to tell Dan Yang that my son-in-law is back. The retired emperor rubbed his nose, his expression gloomy. This father and daughter were too impudent. Didn't they see that he was the retired emperor? He fiercely took a bite of the pastry. He must get his grandson to uphold justice for him. On the other side, Chu Qingyan ran off and threw herself into a sturdy embrace. Smelling the faint scent of ink and the faint warmth of the embrace, the tears that she had been holding back trickled down. It wasn't until this moment that she dared to relax and believe that everything wasn't a dream. The ice cube was really back. As soon as Xiao Su entered the door, he heard a voice rushing towards him from afar. When he saw clearly who it was, he couldn't help but stop in his tracks. He opened his arms with a smile on the corners of his mouth as he welcomed the little fellow who was rushing towards him menacingly. When the person crashed into his embrace, he was slightly stunned, as if something had touched the depths of his soul. His fingers trembled slightly, and he felt as if he was holding the most precious treasure in the world. He lowered his brows, clenched his hands, and chuckled softly. The emptiness in his chest for the past few days was finally filled up. His longing was fulfilled at this moment. It turned out that he had always been longing for the person in his arms. There was no one else. Big Ice Cube, I've been very obedient at home. I didn't do anything to make you angry. Chu Qingyan said in a choked voice. You really didn't? He caressed her head, his soft voice carrying a hint of disbelief. Chu Qingyan immediately shook her head. No, waiting for you was the only thing I could do. I swear. His heart trembled slightly. The warm tears of the person buried in his chest seemed to flow into his heart, warming his heart with an irresistible heat. For the first time in so many years, he felt that returning home meant something to him. Is that so? His voice trembled. You didn't eat properly, you didn't rest properly, and you still dare to say that you didn't make this prince angry? When she ran over, he had already seen the dark circles under her eyes. When he hugged her, he could clearly feel that she had lost a lot of weight, but she also seemed to have grown a little taller. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan stuck out her tongue and wiped all her tears on his clothes without any restraint. She rolled her large eyes and said, Isn't it all your fault? It's all your fault for making me worry. Still twisting words and forcing logic? Who is the one who said that the body is the capital of a revolution? Without capital, how can a revolution be made? Xiao Su raised his brows and mocked. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she buried her face in his chest and compromised, all right, I was wrong. Now that you're back, I'll eat properly and rest properly. I guarantee that I'll grow white and fat. Only then was Xiao Su satisfied. Reporting to Master, this subordinate didn't see anything. Ling, who had been watching for an unknown amount of time, covered his eyes with his hands, revealing the gaps between his fingers. "Let's go." Turin slightly turned his body, but his gaze was still on the two of them. "Let's go." Wood Spirit and Ethereal stood under the tree and said with smiles. Chapter 154. Only then did Chu Qingyan realize that she couldn't control herself, and she was like a little child in the big ice cube's embrace. Sometimes she started to wonder if she had really gotten used to her identity as a 10-year-old. Was that why she was so shamelessly throwing herself at the big ice cube? Realizing this, Chu Qingyan blushed and jumped out of the big ice cube's embrace. She pointed at the spirits beside her and rolled her eyes. "You peeping toms. Little princess consort, we guarantee that we really didn't see anything," Hualing said with a sneaky smile. Wood Spirit, Turin, and Ethereal all chimed in. Chu Qingyan was gloomy. Xiao Su raised his hand to pat the little fellow's fuming little head and lightly reprimanded his subordinates. "Alright, stop fooling around." The four spirits looked at each other. "Look, Master is starting to protect the little princess consort again." However, they all had a tacit understanding. Standing in a row, they changed from their previous laziness and solemnly bowed. "Welcome back to the Fu, Master." Xiao Su's brows couldn't help but soften, and the little fellow standing beside him held his hand. The coldness from the depths of the palace was slowly dispelled. "Imperial Grandfather is in the Fu. Do you want to go see him?" Chu Qingyan raised her head to ask. Xiao Su understood. If Imperial Grandfather hadn't appeared, this prison sentence would have been far in the future. His expression darkened slightly, but it wasn't noticed because it was hidden by the mask. And Chu Qingyan only felt that the big ice cube's hand seemed to have become much colder. She instantly gripped him harder, wanting to give him her own warmth. But when they returned to the hall, they only left behind a table full of pastry crumbs and empty plates. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but ask Huang Yi, who was cleaning up, "Where's Emperor Emeritus?" "He went to the side courtyard with eldest Lord Chu. He said he wanted to compete who could shoot further." Because her lord had returned, Huang Yi's tone was filled with joy. Chu Qingyan face-bombed. These two old urchins, their ages added together were almost 100 years old, yet they were still jumping around. Big Ice Cube said, "Grandpa Emperor is unruly. Let him be." Chu Qingyan immediately nodded. "I've already asked Hong Yi to arrange hot water for you. Go take a bath and wash away the bad luck. I'll hold a welcoming dinner for you tonight." Xiao Su didn't think that in just a few days, she would be able to take charge of the household. From the steward's tone towards her, as well as the servant's orderly behavior during his absence, it could be seen that her position in the household was slowly taking root. He was still slightly surprised by her growth. But on second thought, he was ultimately stronger than ordinary people. Thus, he didn't say anything else and turned around to take a shower. After he took a shower and changed into casual clothes, he saw the little fellow who was about to go out with her blanket. He frowned slightly. "Come here." Chu Qingyan heard his voice and turned around. Although she didn't know why the big ice cube called her, she still walked over obediently. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I heard that in order to avoid bad luck, the clothes and blankets in the room have to be changed. I'll help you take the blankets out." Chu Qingyan didn't think there was a problem and replied. Xiao Su frowned. "Put it down and let the servants take care of it. Then sit down." Thinking that the big ice cube had something to say to her, she immediately put down the blankets in her hands and sat down on the chaise lounge in front of him. She asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Xiao Su didn't answer. He squatted down in front of her and lifted her skirt without any explanation. She was stunned and immediately raised her hand to stop him. She said with a stupefied expression, "Big Ice Cube, what are you doing?" Although she struggled a little, her strength was as small as an ant to him. He easily lifted her skirt and revealed her two white and tender lotus-like calves. Because she had to apply medicine these few days, she had specially asked Xining to cut her trousers to her knees so that it would be easier to apply medicine. Thus, Xiao Su saw the bloody wound at a glance. Although she had already applied medicine yesterday, even the best medicine needed time to heal. Xiao Su's eyes darkened. He had been through hundreds of battles and had suffered many injuries in his life. With one look he knew where it came from. You entered the palace? Xiao Su looked at the person above him with deep eyes. She had thought that the big ice cube was going to do something to her, but it was only because he was suspicious of her inconvenient legs. She thought that she had pretended well, but unfortunately, she still couldn't escape his eyes. However, Chu Qingyan still secretly despised her own bad thoughts. Yes, but it's fine now. It doesn't hurt anymore. Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. Looking at the person who was lying through her teeth, Xiao Su raised his hand and gently pressed it. He heard the sound of sobbing above him and stood up. Where is the medicine? Chu Qingyan grimaced in pain. The big ice cube really didn't know how to be gentle with a woman. She pursed her lips and pointed at the cabinet. Xiao Su turned around and came back with a bottle of medicine. Then, he sat down on the couch and gently lifted her legs to rest on his lap. Chu Qingyan was shocked. Was the big ice cube planning to apply the medicine for her personally? Although it was the big ice cube who applied the medicine for her before, she didn't know why she was a little bashful at this moment. She didn't know what was wrong with her. No need. I'll do it myself. Chu Qingyan said as she wanted to take the medicine bottle from the big ice cube's hand. Don't move. Xiao Su glanced at her and then lowered his head to apply the medicine for her seriously. The ice-cold medicine was applied to her sore knees, alleviating a lot of the pain. She looked at the big ice cube who was seriously applying the medicine for her and suddenly felt that it was a bit inconceivable. He should be a proud son of heaven, a war god that everyone knew, but he was willing to do something that didn't match his status. However, he was so calm as if it was a normal thing. Her heart felt like it had been lightly touched by someone. It felt a bit itchy and an indescribable throbbing. She thought of something and said to the serious person, Big Ice Cube, I shouldn't have lost my temper with you in the imperial prison. I apologize. Xiao Su's lips curled slightly and he looked up to tease her. Where's the stubbornness you had when you were angry with this prince? I wasn't angry. I was a bit angry at that time. Who told you to think that you had a way out for me? I wouldn't have agreed. Chu Qingyan said righteously. Xiao Su's hand paused when he heard this and a complicated emotion flashed through his eyes. Right now, she was unhappy because of his arrangements, so he had to convince her to accept the arrangements he had for her. Chu Qingyan felt that something was wrong with his absent-mindedness. She was about to ask him about it when someone knocked on the door. Xiao Su put down her clothes and said, Come in. Gu Rong entered and reported, Lord, the fourth prince has come to the residence to request an audience. Xiao Su stood up when he heard this. Bring him to the guest room. After saying this, Xiao Su turned around and reminded her, Don't run around. Be careful of your wound. Chu Qingyan nodded and forgot what she wanted to ask as she watched him leave. However, she faintly felt that there was something wrong with the big ice cube's return this time. However, she didn't know what was wrong and she was a bit confused. Chapter 155. Xiao Su entered the drawing room and saw the pale-faced Xiao Ran sitting in the chair. He couldn't help but frown and scolded, You're seriously injured. Instead of resting in the palace, you're running around. Are you tired of living? Xiao Ran, who had been worried that his eldest brother would be angry at him, heard the long-awaited scolding. His eyes burned and he blurted out, Eldest brother, this subject brother didn't deliberately not come out to clear your name. It was, this subject brother couldn't help it. I'm really sorry. Seeing him blame himself and be hurt, Xiao Su sighed in his heart, This matter has nothing to do with you. You don't have to blame yourself. Eldest brother, as princes, do we have to be forced to kill each other for that position? Xiao Ran suddenly had the urge to pour out his heart. During this period of time, he had been lying in bed, his heart full of confusion and fear for the future. But he didn't know who to say it to. Only now did he find an outlet to pour it out. Eldest brother, I'm afraid that in the end, I'll become the kind of person I hate. Xiao Su reached out to pat his shoulder and said sincerely, Guard your heart, then you can maintain your original heart. Xiao Ran's eyes reddened, but he knew that he was a man. A man didn't cry easily. so he could only endure it. This subject brother will remember eldest brother's teachings. Go back. Don't make people worry, Xiao Su said lightly. Xiao Ren nodded. Before leaving, he turned his head and said, I snuck out of the palace. I can't stay for too long. Eldest brother, help me say sorry to Qingyan. If it wasn't for him, Qingyan wouldn't have knelt for so many hours to plead for leniency. After Xiao Ran left, a pair of black gold boots appeared at the door. Her white eyebrows were slightly raised. Your imperial father didn't hesitate to make things difficult for you because of him. His imperial mother is always against you. It's rare for you to treat him with such sincerity. It's rare for the imperial family to have such a kind heart. Hearing the pity in his imperial grandfather's words, Xiao Su calmly replied, Grandson is just following his own heart. I can't be considered kind. Grandpa, I didn't think that after going through so many things, you would still be so respectful and filial. The retired emperor walked into the hall, shaking his head as he spoke. His tone was somewhat incredulous, but he felt that it was reasonable. He still had some understanding of this imperial grandson of his. Isn't it all because of imperial grandfather's teachings? What's more, fourth imperial brother is also your imperial grandson. Xiao Su handed him a cup of tea and calmly retorted. The retired emperor suddenly widened his eyes. Have you been with Yen Lass for so long that you've also learned to contradict me? Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his imperial grandfather's intermittent strangeness. He calmly said, Qingyan is still young. There are some things that she didn't do well. Please forgive her, imperial grandfather. You haven't even married into the family, yet you're already siding with outsiders. Xiao Su, don't forget that I'm your grandfather. The retired emperor blew his beard and glared. Xiao Su smiled. Grandson also didn't say that you weren't grandfather. Moreover, imperial grandfather, don't forget that this marriage was personally bestowed by you. The retired emperor was stunned. It was indeed bestowed by him. He suddenly felt like he had lifted a rock and smashed it on his own foot. The retired emperor stomped his feet in anger. Why did this good grandson's way of speaking change after being with Yen Lass for a period of time? It didn't make sense. Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his imperial grandfather stomping his feet. He sat down and picked up the teacup in his hand. His thoughts drifted away. This trip was fraught with danger. How should he tell the little fellow to stay in the residence with peace of mind? No one responded to his monologue for a long time. The retired emperor gloomily glared at him. Then he found a comfortable position to sit down in. His tone also recovered its seriousness and became less frivolous. What did your imperial father call you to the imperial study to talk to you about? Xiao Su pulled back from his contemplation and faintly said, traces of or were found in the Fuli mountain range. Imperial father asked grandson to investigate. Hearing this, the retired emperor frowned. I've been the emperor for so many years. How come I didn't know that there were ores there? It was discovered recently. Grandson also didn't know. Xiao Su frowned, hiding the faint coldness in his eyes. The retired emperor couldn't figure it out, so he shook his head and continued to ask, it shouldn't be that simple. There should be additional tasks. Xiao Su nodded. He didn't speak bluntly and only praised. Imperial grandfather's guess is very accurate. The retired emperor sighed softly. At this time, he had a dignified aura that came from within. His eyes were sharp and it was hard to imagine that the old urchin from before was him. How could I not understand my son? After so many years, he still hasn't changed. He's obstinate and doesn't listen to others. Forget it. One is my son and the other is my grandson. They can do whatever they want. I can't control them. The retired emperor had a helpless expression. Xiao Su stood up and bowed to appease him. Imperial grandfather, your son and grandson have their own fortune. You can relax and live the life you want. The retired emperor jumped up when he heard this. His beard trembled in anger. You dare say it like it's not you. I hope that when I return to the capital in the future, I won't have to collect your corpse. I won't play with you anymore. I'm going to find Huayuan. Humph. Xiao Su helplessly shook his head when he heard this. After a while, Huoling and Turin entered the study. They immediately saw their master standing in front of the window with his back to them. "Master, are you really going to the Fuli mountain range?" Huoling couldn't control his temper and took the lead to ask. Master had just stepped out of the imperial palace when the news came out. Water Spirit immediately passed the news to them when she received it. Master had just been released from prison and His Majesty had sent him to the Fuli mountain range to find that ghost mine. From an outsider's point of view, they would think that Master was the mastermind behind the assassination. However, His Majesty saw that Master was a prince and couldn't bear to offend him. He found a reason to release Master. Moreover, right now was the time when the Crown Prince was being discussed. If Master was far away from the capital, wouldn't he not have a chance to compete? It's hard to disobey the imperial order. Xiao Su turned around and looked at his angry subordinate as he lightly spoke. "This," Huoling opened his mouth. In the end, he gritted his teeth and lowered his head. Even Master couldn't disobey the imperial order. What right did they have to say anything? Turin raised his head to look at his cold master and asked in confusion, "Master, according to Water Spirit's investigation, the Fuli mountain range stretches for thousands of li and is uninhabited. People have gone to investigate before, but they didn't find any traces of ore. Therefore, this subordinate is worried that this mission will be difficult to carry out. Everything depends on effort. Moreover, this mine search is only one of the missions. There are other secret orders. Go and prepare. In 3 days we will set out." Xiao Su frowned as he spoke. His gaze was a bit complicated. Turin and Huoling responded. However, before they left, Turin turned around and asked hesitantly, "Little princess consort still doesn't know about this. Should this subordinate inform her?" Xiao Su turned to look outside the window at the bright red lanterns. After being absent-minded for a moment, he slowly said to his subordinate's worried expression, "Go and do your work first. Ben Wang has other arrangements." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.